Whenever someone faces danger, they search for a god, whether it be God, Buddha, or another deity. They think of the one they worship and beg for salvation, but if that god is in danger, a screen appears stating the jury's vote on the twilight inhalated, a term relating to creations. He calls out his system, but it notifies that the window cannot be opened due to insufficient access authority, and that the system does not function smoothly here, instructing him to inquire about the circumstances of his death. He notes that his divine status, divine seat, and faith status were all forcibly degraded, his divinity revoked, and his divine power gone, yet his mind remains intact and the system windows stay closed. Sensing someone behind him, he turns to see a boat approaching over the sea. On board, a man wearing a hat unrolls a scroll, stating the Twilight of the Gods, Lee Cheogseon, Father Lee Jamyung, Mother Soyoha, was born in Korea on Earth on December 25, 2001, and for unknown reasons went to the planet Arcadia in 2027. There, as an abominable god, he became a star, killed millions of gods, and was eventually captured and brought to an execution ground. The man said Lee bore his appearance and asked if he would not answer, but Lee ignored him and stood. He moved toward the man, reaching out to touch his face, but before he could, droplets appeared around him, followed by cube-like objects that formed handcuffs on his wrists. It was divine suppression steel, which weakens a god to a level lower than that of mere creation. Lee clenched his teeth, thinking he had not seen this since the divine punishment trial and believed he was free of it. He asked who they were. The man introduced himself as the top reaper of the underworld, but Lee interrupted, questioning if this was the afterlife. The reaper confirmed, saying the place before them was the river Styx, and noted he had heard that a god sent to the divine punishment trial would be inhalated, asking why he was here. The reaper explained it was because Lee was originally under their jurisdiction and suggested discussing details during the trip, as the person who brought him was waiting. Irritated, Lee sat on the boat with the reaper, who began explaining that Arcadia is completely different from Earth. Lee asked if that was related to the jurisdiction mentioned earlier. The reaper agreed, saying all humans live their lives with their lifespan and destiny recorded in the record of life and death, and that record can only be used in the place it was written. Lee listened in silence as the reaper continued, explaining that one of those records suddenly broke away. He had searched hard to find him, but Lee had ended up in a peculiar place. Lee asked if that place was Arcadia, and the reaper confirmed, adding that Lee had become a god and caused chaos and they had to give up much to bring him back. Lee stayed quiet, his mind drifting to a memory of standing before an opening in the sky, before asking why they went to such trouble, pointing out that letting him be annihilated there would have benefited them as well. The reaper replied that he did only as he was told. Lee asked who made the decision, and the reaper smirked, naming Thanatos, head of Tartarus and Erebos, known by some as the king of the underworld. A man steering the boat said they had arrived, and the reaper told Lee to follow closely from there on. Below them, he pointed out the hell of the fairy pit and the hell of cold ice, continuing to describe the places as they went. Lee asked about their statuses, noting they seemed different. The reaper smirked, saying he had heard Lee was a battle god before becoming an abominable god and that Lee seemed curious. He explained they were fallen stars and that Thanatos not only judged the sins of souls but also sealed demonic or evil gods. Lee said he had never heard of that, and the reaper replied that such things would not be discussed if they harmed one's prestige in heaven. He added that those with lesser sins were sentenced to minor labor. They arrived at the front gate, and the reaper said this was it, calling for a first-class reaper to proceed under his order. The door opened, revealing a purple glow inside, and a voice echoed, telling them to enter. As Lee stepped inside, darkness surrounded him, and a message appeared stating the atmosphere was overwhelming and a pair of eyes were watching him from within the darkness. Lee smirked, thinking it looked like it would be fun. A man seated on a throne appeared before Lee, asking if he was the Twilight of the Gods. He said he would ask first and questioned where Lee thought he would end up if he had continued living on Earth. Lee replied that he had never thought about it. Thanatos answered it would be hell. Lee asked why, and Thanatos cited June 21, 2024, during Lee's pro-gamer days, when he swore heavily at a teammate for a mistake, causing the teammate to take it to heart. Thanatos explained the punishment for that incident would be having his tongue ripped out for 15 days in the hell of a tongue reaper. He continued, saying that on April 9, 2024, Lee ignored a request from a heartbroken friend because he was gaming, which would send him to the hell of the Mountain of Knives. On September 9, 2017, Lee stepped on and killed an ant on his way to school, which counted as killing a living thing, earning 4 days in the hell of a venomous snake. Thanatos continued, citing April 2009 when Lee wet the bed while asleep and blamed the dog, earning 10 more days in the hell of a tongue reaper. He added that for 26 years, Lee had never held a girl's hand, which meant 6 days in the hell of darkness. The tense atmosphere made Lee's knees stiff and sweat drip, and he shouted, asking what he was playing at. Thanatos smirked, saying it was a joke and that while Lee had lived a normal life on Earth, he became a completely different person in Arcadia. He lifted a scroll containing all of Lee's deeds, noting how fiercely he had fought. Lee asked what he was trying to say and why he had saved him. Thanatos replied that he wanted Lee to do a job for him. When Lee asked what kind of job, Thanatos explained that some gods had broken their oath and reached out to humans, and he wanted Lee to go to the mundane world in his place to seal them. Lee asked if that meant reincarnation, but Thanatos clarified that he would simply be returning him to where he was supposed to be. With that, he swept his hand to the right, revealing a galaxy filled with planets. Lee's eyes widened at the sight of the planet before him. Thanatos remarked that he thought Lee was emotionless but clearly was not. Lee replied that it was his home. Thanatos said that seeing what was to come would make him faint. Lee asked what he meant, but without answering, Thanatos teleported him to Earth. It was only a brief glimpse before his Earth self looked upward and was then teleported back in front of Thanatos, who said he would send him there to focus on sealing the gods in his stead, calling it the sentence Lee would receive. Lee asked why he was being given the opportunity, and Thanatos replied that he was the most suited to hunt divine beings from other worlds such as Uhura, Davia, and Chen of Arcadia. Lee asked if those beings had done something, and Thanatos explained that the dungeon break Lee experienced was caused by them. Lee understood this as breaking the oath and asked if they desired Earth. Thanatos confirmed, saying they were slowly approaching. Lee asked why the underworld was not taking action, and Thanatos explained that the others knew the loopholes of the oath, leaving them without justification to intervene, but a human could act since the oath made no mention of that. Lee smirked, saying Thanatos wanted him as a hunting dog who would be killed after the job was done. Thanatos said it was penal labor, and once the task was complete, he would remove Lee's chains and give him a new life. He added that if Lee disliked the explanation, they could make a deal, and it would not be a bad one for him. He assured that Lee would not be sent to seal the gods without help and offered him a gift. When Lee asked what it was, Thanatos answered, authority. Lee questioned if he could just give it away, saying it should be against the law of the underworld, but Thanatos replied that as the ruler of the entire underworld, anything he gave could be considered a ruler's gift, and asked if Lee would accept. Lee smirked, saying that if he was getting that, he had no reason to refuse. Thanatos stood, saying the deal was made and that Lee's reincarnation, or rather regression, would now begin, instructing everyone to prepare to open the gate of rebirth. A smirk remained on Lee's face. After meeting with Thanatos, the Reaper took Lee back onto the boat, reminding him that he was returning not as a god but as a human, starting from the beginning without any abilities or experience. Lee said he would keep it in mind. The Reaper added that his soul was still restricted by divine suppression as before, and if any suspicious circumstances were detected, it would be activated again. Lee thought to himself that his ears might bleed from the explanation. Finally, the Reaper told him to go. They arrived at a tall golden gate with a Yen Yun sign in the middle, and Lee leapt toward the peak. The gate began to open and Lee looked back, telling the Reaper they might meet again if there was a chance. The Reaper replied that he would be waiting and reminded Lee that he was a man who had received the power of the underworld and the power of its king. With that, Lee jumped through the door, feeling as if he were falling from the sky. A message appeared, stating he had successfully passed through the gate of rebirth and would be connected to the new server. Data began downloading for a smooth process, and the system updated, instructing him to wait. His current authority was listed as administrator, and the system confirmed the planet as Earth. Lee closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was lying on the grass. A message appeared, stating that the accomplishment, Regressor with Memories of His Past Life, would reward memory maintenance, adding, all is dead +5. Still on the ground, Lee thought even this had been turned into an accomplishment. Panic then broke out among the people as they questioned what was happening, saying a gate had suddenly appeared and that they had never heard of such a thing. Lee noticed their black hair and black eyes speaking Korean, and thought happily that he had truly returned. As the people panicked, he stood and saw a circle in the middle of the forest where they all were gathered. He recalled Thanatos's words that the place he would open his eyes in was Earth but also not Earth, since connecting to another place was not easy, a village still hidden from the eyes of a god from another world. Lee had asked earlier where he would wake up, and Thanatos had told him it would be a dungeon. Now, surrounded by panicked people shouting that their phones were not working and demanding to be let out, Lee saw a notification appear in front of him. It read, "Welcome to the Instant Dungeon, Rosewood Forest. Current number of attendees, 431. An error has occurred. An omitted attendance has been detected. The number has been recalculated. Current number of attendees, 432. The dungeon mission began, explaining that to judge each attendee's individual strength, a mission with an appropriate level of difficulty had been assigned. Defeat the monsters lurking in Rosewood Forest and climb to the top of the hill beyond it. The forest was divided into 5 sections, each with different monsters and different reclamation methods. Attendees could use their inventory, status window, and skill window to aid them. The instructions ended with a wish of good luck. As the first section opened, everyone saw the same notification, but without waiting, Lee immediately sprinted toward it. People watching shouted warnings that it was dangerous. Lee ignored the warnings and moved toward the newly opened section. People watching were confused, wondering if he was a player and noting that he looked familiar. A girl questioned if he might be the tyrant. As he ran, Lee thought it was frustrating that he was already out of breath after so little distance and decided he needed to first assess the state of his body. He tried opening the system window but was told he lacked access rights and that his rights were currently sealed. The system then updated, allowing the status window to open using his administrator qualification. Seeing his stats, Lee thought it was a mess and wondered where the gift from the king of the underworld was. Within seconds, the window refreshed and became more organized, showing authorities secured along with soul extortion Lard of 1 and executioner's sword Lath of 1. The description explained that soul extortion allowed the souls of slain enemies to be stored, with karma extorted by burning them in the flames of purgatory, granting irreversible physical body strengthening. Thanks to the power to preside over souls, the king of the underworld was highly regarded, and among those powers, soul extortion contained a portion of that authority. This granted Lee the ability to use the flames of purgatory. Whenever he caught monsters, he could extort their souls to gain more experience. Against multiple enemies, it allowed him to conserve stamina and avoid the danger of accumulating injuries. When information was needed, he could summon a soul and torture it for answers. The next skill, Executioner's Sword, allowed him to carry out divine punishment on criminals who had broken the covenant, granting him the right to a portion of the criminal's authority. Its effects included execution of divine punishment, punishing evil, and extortion of authority. Since authority was the strength of the divine, using the executioner's sword to seal gods would let him take their authority as well. In theory, he could collect infinite authorities and become both ominous and omnipotent. Smirking, Lee thought it was fortunate he had not been scammed, and even for the king of the underworld, granting this must not have been easy. It seemed he was truly irritated with the god of the underworld, but the executioner's sword was still too difficult to use for now. In terms of ability, it surpassed soul extortion, yet its requirements were too strict. His target had to be a criminal who had clearly broken the covenant, and even then, if he failed to defeat them properly, he would take damage himself. For now, he decided to keep it sealed. His thoughts were cut short when a notification appeared stating he had been detected by a black mamba. Before him was a massive, menacing snake with a terrifying face. As soon as it lunged toward him, Lee felt a surge of strength. A screen appeared stating he had acquired a rusted dagger for beginner attacks. Without hesitation, Lee sliced the black mamba in half in a single strike. A message confirmed the kill, noting it was a perfect attack, and awarded him the low-grade dagger technique as a reward. His strength increased by 2, dexterity by 1, and a divine being god associated with hunting was now watching him with interest. Feeling pleased, Lee thought he would become a rookie capable of making those beings drool. To humans, dungeons are both a natural disaster and a new doorway to opportunity. And the same applies to the gods and the stars. They use dungeon missions to choose priests or cleric candidates who will spread their gospel, as well as envoys who will carry out their will. Many humans seeking the power of the gods and stars enter these dungeons, and countless teams perish while the gods and stars pay them no mind. To those indifferent deities, mortal lives that will eventually fade are unworthy of notice. Only a rare few gain the luck and blessing to meet their standards or display extraordinary talent. A message then appeared before Lee, stating that the divine being Good Season to Hunt had expressed interest in him. Lee considers it a jackpot when he sees the name Good Season to Hunt, knowing her true identity as Pablasag, the famed goddess of war who wields every weapon for the thrill of hunting. What excites him most is that her mother is the primordial evil dragon Tiamat. Looking at the dagger, he remarks that for such a powerful figure to take interest in him so early, the dagger technique must have impressed her, and the screen confirms her fascination with his hunting style. Declaring that he will give her what she wants, he ventures deeper into the dungeon, catching a whiff of the air. He notes that the first half of this forest is saturated with poison, likely making most of its monsters venomous. With that in mind, he recalls a particular plant, but before he can act, two black mambas lunge from behind. Smirking as he turns, he decides to use a snake hunting method tailored for such prey, leaping into the air and cleaving the serpent in two with a single strike. As Lee continues cutting down black mambas, his experience points steadily rise. The screen notifies him that he has swiftly exterminated the black mambas ruling the front territory of Rosewood Forest, and his senses sharpen with each kill. He slaughters every one that crosses his path, his expression darkening as he thinks they fear the idea of a mere mortal standing above them. He had no such intention at first, but if that is what they dread, he resolves to make it happen. Wiping them all out, he triggers the message that his low-grade dagger technique has advanced, unlocking a higher-grade skill, and Good Season to Hunt bursts out in awe at his exceptional mastery. Smirking, he remarks it is still too soon for surprise. Extending his hand, he uses soul exhaustion, sending a faint pink glow into the pile of black mamba corpses, feeling as though he is absorbing something from them. The screen reports that Flames of Purgatory has been activated, granting him the ashes of the black mambas, restoring 5% of his stamina, and removing his exhaustion. He smirks again, satisfied with the results. The screen displays a message saying Good Season to Hunt is puzzled, unable to determine what type of ability Lee possesses. Moving forward, he keeps slashing black mambas without pause, thinking she could never have guessed that a novice just entering a dungeon would already carry the blessing of the king of the underworld. It is obvious she is curious about his attributes or abilities, the kind players usually gain upon first awakening. Yet he knows she will not make any move towards someone ambitious like him due to the principle of curiosity. No one in their right mind would break the law of causality just to gather information. Breathing steadily, he assures himself that even if such a thing happened, he would not be concerned. Suddenly, a black mamba coils around him, but without even glancing its way, he slashes his dagger across its neck, confident that the protective system granted by the underworld is so stable that, if not for it, his status window would have been exposed long ago. After hunting exactly 444 black mambas, he receives a reward, low-grade poison resistance and a strength increase of 5 points. Ordering the system window to open, he checks his status, pleased to see his level and skills steadily rising. Now that his magic power has increased, he believes he can finally begin using his abilities more effectively. A message appears telling him a god is currently interested in him and urging him to gain that god's favor by performing even greater feats. It also notes that Pablasag's curiosity and interest in him has risen to a very high level since he has cleared out the black mambas, red mambas, and bloody mambas. With his new poison resistance, though still low grade, he feels confident he can press on without much trouble. The bloody mamba is known as the boss mob controlling the other mambas, and while it is absurd for a novice under level 10 to challenge it, Lee considers attempting a solo raid. He sees this as a chance to draw the god's attention, but more importantly, its poisonous fang would be a shortcut to gaining poison immunity. Being outnumbered was one reason the Twilight of the Gods lost the war, but another was Lee's own helplessness against curses and poison. Determined, he grips his dagger, thinking of the curse of Gaia and how he needs that fang to overcome it. Suddenly, the dagger in his hand begins turning into ash-like crystals, and the system announces the durability of the rusted dagger for beginners has reached 0 and is being destroyed. Lee finds it impressive it lasted this long, but a moment later, a scratching voice comes from the sky and something falls beside him, a blade. Recognizing it, he says dragon scale pattern, realizing it is a weapon from Tiamat. The screen then reveals divine being Good Season to Hunt is offering the weapon as part of a bet with him, with the condition that if he fails, she will kill him for wasting her time. Lee mutters that he knew it. Lee smirks, thinking she is making it clear from the start that failure means death. He reflects on how the so-called writers see themselves as important while treating others as mere entertainment, which is exactly why he has always despised the gods and stars. Yet now, the situation seems to have shifted in his favor. If he plays his cards right, there is much he can gain. The Tiamat dagger alone would be a huge asset if he can claim it. Deciding to go along, he asks what needs to be done. The system confirms his acceptance of the bet, and the divine being Good Season of Hunt laughs heartily at his boldness, her amusement growing at his fearless spirit. A new quest is issued, Hunter's Certification. As people gathered in panic, a man called out for them to come closer. They turned to see what was happening, some questioning if he was trying to act important. Holding up his identity badge, he introduced himself as Second Lieutenant Park Hyo-seong, a C-ranked player of the Awakened Force under the Military Defense Support Command, and gave an emergency order for everyone to follow his instructions. Some expressed relief at having at least one player present, though others wondered if he could handle it, mentioning the man who had run off as soon as the danger mission began. One speculated he might be chasing fortune, but another sitting against a tree said he likely had more money than anyone there. When asked how he knew, he explained that the man was a tyrant and leader of the ST band, someone with a bad personality but handsome looks who had done many ads and grown up wealthy. Another questioned why someone like that would go, and the man replied he had heard the guy became an alcoholic after retiring as a pro gamer, possibly going out to commit suicide. From behind, another man told him to shut up, accusing him of still being drunk. The man protested, but a screen suddenly appeared, announcing that all black mambas in the dungeon had been killed, surprising the players. Notifications followed. A white worm had been killed, all blue crows had been killed, and red mambas were being taken down quickly, with player Lee advancing rapidly, shocking everyone. One man clenched his teeth in frustration. Meanwhile, Lee continued defeating monsters with ease. A screen appeared announcing the Hunter certification category sudden. Because the divine being good season to Hunt's growth had stagnated, she took interest in his style and aimed to increase her faith in him. With most skilled players already sponsored, she had no choice but to monitor novices and had discovered him, considering him highly skilled in hunting and a candidate to become her apostle. However, he could not be accepted immediately and would first be verified. Within 24 hours, he was to defeat the Bloody Mamba under a temporary death condition. Failure would mean death, and success would grant the evil dragon Snaggletooth in the apostle candidate selection. Holding a dagger, Lee thinks that her interest in him from the start now makes sense and assumes her situation must be urgent. He recalls the recent conflict between Tiamat and Belmerduk, wondering if it is related. Tiamat, the primordial evil dragon and mother of good season to Hunt, opposed Belmerduk, one of the most powerful of the 12 zodiac constellations. Lee considers that if his guess is right, there might be far greater gains ahead, and notes the weapon is no ordinary one. A screen displays information about the evil dragon Snaggletooth, a dagger made from the tooth of the primordial evil dragon for her child, possessing its own personality. In its borrowed state, its original ability cannot be used until certain conditions are met. Thinking that aiming higher is better, Lee asks Good Season to Hunt if she would be interested in adding an additional bet. She tilts her head in confusion. He specifies that from now, he will kill the Bloody Mamba within 30 minutes in exchange for a greater reward. The message says she finds the request amusing, smiles widely, and accepts, but warns that if he fails, his death will be far from peaceful. Reading this, Lee thanks her and begins running. As he moves forward, the worm opens its mouth and lunges at Lee. The ground rumbles as he leaps over it, dodging the strike with a smirk. With the dagger, he pierces its body and drags the blade downward, using his weight to tear it apart into several pieces, severely damaging it. His strength increases by 3. The rumors he and Good Season to Hunt have spread like wildfire across heaven, drawing attention. Some gods watch him with suspicion, others observe with interest in his battle experience, which brings a smile to his face. After defeating the smaller monsters, Lee arrives at the Bloody Mamba's location, hiding behind a tree. He recalls Queen's words that more interest is better. She is confused by the number of spectators and warns the gods watching him, the one she chose. Lee considers how many additional gods have been secured, hoping for a strong one. He reaches level 10, unlocks the achievement for quickly escaping novice status, and gains 5 reward points along with a secret class. Thinking back on his previous life as a spare man, he decides not to settle for a normal class. A Dragon King or King of Darkness would be ideal but difficult, so he chooses the Berserker path for its high attack power, accepting the sanity risk, which can be managed with complementary skills. He prepares for the battle, knowing the monster is tough even for a level 20 player. The screen displays available classes: Swordsman, Spearman, and Martial Artist, with 30 options in total. Lee searches but does not find the Berserker class he wants. Only 6 minutes remain. The Bloody Mamba is right behind Lee, and he has only 6 minutes. He planned to use the Berserker class, but it's not an option. A message asks how he will complete the bet in the remaining time while 3 anonymous gods watch curiously. Lee decides on option 30, Ruin Keeper Secret. Though drawing ruins will be tedious, its destructive power exceeds Berserker and compensates for his weaker combat ability. Choosing Ruin Keeper as his primary class, his body glows blue. Dexterity and magic power increase by 5. A new stat, intelligence, is added and 2 class skills appear: lowest grade ruin production and lowest grade ruin engraving. Good season to hunt is shocked, and an anonymous god laughs. Lee forms 2 balls of light from his hands, activating ruin production to produce ruin letters with increasing success rate and decreasing production time as his skill level rises. He also uses ruin engraving, thinking these 2 skills are exactly what he needs. With about 4 minutes left, he adds 30 points to intelligence and 25 more at will. Finally, he cuts his hand, using the skill he learned from Gramps, knowing it will be essential now. The notification confirmed that Ruin of Explosion had been engraved. The divine being, good season to hunt, laughs at Lee's actions. Lee says it's done and extends his dagger, emitting a faint red glow that spreads across the area. The message warns that his magic power is consumed and he is now in a state of hunger. Lee stops hiding and slashes at the bloody mamba. With 3 minutes remaining, he has plenty of time. The lieutenant notices louder explosions than usual in the forest, with smoke rising. People panic, asking what's happening. A message appears. Player Lee has begun the boss raid Bloody Mamba. Everyone is shocked. Some complain about Lee trying to kill them, recalling his reckless behavior in matches. One man urges the lieutenant to act, but he tells them to stay behind, warning that any collapse of the formation could be fatal. The lieutenant focuses, suspecting the light is caused by a skill effect. The lieutenant noted the explosions, realizing they showed critical hits and that the skills were beyond imagination. He thought they finally had a chance and wondered what was happening. Meanwhile, Lee leaped above the ground holding his dagger and slammed it onto the bloody mamba. A massive blast erupted, filling the area with dust. Players watched in shock as a message appeared. Hunter Lee has defeated the boss monster Bloody Mamba, conquering the first section of the dungeon mission. Temporary ranking shows 5,000 points, with Lee in first and Park second. Rewards begin based on acknowledgement. Standing at the cliff's edge, Lee thought he might be witnessing the birth of a new member of the 10 Kings. In the safe zone, a red mamba appeared, causing all attendees to panic and shout. Before it could reach anyone, Lee came from behind and killed it. Lieutenant Park's eyes widened, seeing Lee, thinking something strange about his gaze. Lee said he assumed they were players, and Lieutenant confirmed. Lee said the boss was handled and requested the small fry be taken care of. Lieutenant hesitated, then said they could prepare if he needed rest. Lee held the mamba's body and said he would find a place to rest himself. People whispered in relief, wondering if he was really the tyrant or a demon. Lee overheard them and thought it wasn't strange for them to see him that way. The system announced a 1-hour break before the second section. Standing by the mamba's body, Lee engraved a large stone, creating the Ruin of Obstruction. An invisible 4-sided wall formed around the body. The system confirmed the ruin creation reached max level and unlocked a higher rank skill. Lee decided to organize rewards first, receiving spoils, ranking, and the hunter certification on standby. The system prompted him to pick from 4 reward categories: 1. Skill, 2. Effect, 3. Items, 4. Achievement points. He smirked, saying picking low-level spoils was pointless and he was fine with the evil dragon's snaggletooth for now. He chose option 4 for achievement points. The system confirmed. He picked the 4th category, gained 10,000 karma, and his total achievement points were now 15,000. He smirked, noting that both the human world and the realm of gods favored the rich and thought he'd prepare for the shop opening later. Opening his system window, he reviewed his status and skills, satisfied that taking down the bloody mamba alone had been worthwhile. Suddenly, multiple notifications appeared. The first reward, Evil Dragon's Snaggletooth, was now in his possession. Good season to hunt showed covetousness toward him. A few gods and stars had begun openly taking interest. A red warning appeared. The divine being strongly warned that anyone touching what was hers would face the wrath of a dragon. Lee laughed. Another notification asked what he wanted as an additional reward from the bet, offering Anartism Gold Bar, Heavenly Chalice, or Omnipotent Stone. The system said she assured him no treasure would be too much to appease him, surprising some gods. Lee thought he couldn't be satisfied with just that and left the reward unchosen as the list closed. The screen notified Lee that Good Season to Hunt frowned, wondering if he harbored hidden intentions. The reward he didn't claim would be substituted with achievement points. The system also indicated she was unsatisfied and suggested he receive candidacy as an apostle. Lee noted he was gaining a lot from betting with a god but had no intention of remaining a candidate. Notifications kept coming. Some gods had brought popcorn to watch, A few previously disinterested gods were now amused and curious. Lee thought that showing unparalleled worth would attract entities to his side, and if the fight with Belmerduk was true, Tiamat's side would need more talent. Everything was aligning with his plan. He held his dagger, cut the bloody mamba, and started extracting its organs. The screen notified him that rumors of his rejection of the offer and becoming an opponent had spread throughout heaven. Curious gods began connecting to the dungeon channel KR 9721. On the safe zone, people were seated, but one man was furious, insisting he could do it too. Another man argued, warning him about awakening talent, but the angry man claimed a drunkard could do it, so he could too. Suddenly, a light struck from the sky with a huge glow. A notification appeared. The ambassador had arrived. As the energy settled, a figure resembling a bunny appeared, saying he was Harold, the administrator of the KR channel. The administrator greeted everyone, introducing himself as Harold, in charge of the Korean channel. He let out a creepy laugh, prompting someone to ask why an ambassador had suddenly appeared. Harold replied that he might have disturbed their rest but explained he was here because something had happened that needed their understanding. When the lieutenant asked what it was, Harold explained that due to bureau policy, they usually maintain non-interference and give players a high degree of freedom, but there had been a sudden spike in transmission rates in the dungeon channel, irritating upper management. Therefore, he apologized and said he needed to adjust the difficulty. The crowd reacted in shock, demanding what he meant. With a snap of his fingers, the shield surrounding the safe zone cracked, and a notification appeared before all players. Based on current achievements, difficulty would be greatly increased, the safe zone would be removed, and monster aggression, attack, and defense would be heightened. People shouted in protest, while the lieutenant silently realized it was the same as before, a filtering. He recalls the last time, when the fully banded people died in piles before him. Back then, the gods and constellations had also summoned an administrator to greatly increase difficulty, testing if any exceptional novice could become an apostle. Now, he envisions countless people being sacrificed again and wonders if the gods think he has that potential. Lee Chongxiang then sees a screen stating that due to increased difficulty, the remaining rest time is gone. Monsters have been granted more freedom, are in a state of hunger, and players must first survive the attack of the famished predators. They may now form parties of up to 10 members, with contributions rewarded by equipment. Hunting monsters may yield the orb of fire, and each party must collect 99 crystals to pass the second stage. Everyone clutches their weapons, shouting in confusion that they've never seen anything like this. A 5-second countdown begins. Harold appears beside the lieutenant, asking if he is the player Park. The lieutenant confirms, and Harold says of course, he's the sole survivor of the evil dragons, someone the Bureau is watching closely. He adds that he will pray for his safety. The countdown ends, a message announces the start of the second stage, and a wave of wolves charges forward. People shout to attack as a man sprints toward the beasts, thinking this is his chance. A screen appears before him, saying the blessing of the divine being Owl that praises through the twilight is with him, and he begins fighting. Meanwhile, Lee finally finds a poisonous fang and smiles, saying to wait for him poison immunity, as he's coming soon. He also gets notified that the second stage has begun and that the gods interested in him are curious about his actions, even placing bets on how long he'll survive. Lee clenches his weapon, thinking the filtering has already started. He thinks he still has some time, then wonders if winning his bet with Pablasag caused more gods to take interest in him than expected. Checking his stats, he sees HP at 151 out of 448, MP at 8 out of 250, and stamina at 2 out of 30, calling it pathetic. He notes stamina is the bigger issue but starts running anyway, saying things aren't going his way. A creature appears beside him, identified as a fire lizard. He recalls the first stage was living organism poison, and now the second is fire poison, guessing the next stages could be ice, metal, and corpse poison. He figures he needs to obtain accumulation of fire energy here. Standing before the fire lizard, he dodges its fireball by bending down, then tries to cut its neck with his dagger but fails. The lizard swings its tail, but he spins 360 degrees to dodge, then avoids another fireball before slashing its body and cutting it in half, defeating it. He notes its stamina is nothing like the black mambas and that hunting it in packs would be tough. Opening its body, he takes out an orb of fire and swallows it, gaining low-grade fire resistance. Burping, he spits out a small burst of fire. He moves forward, thinking he needs to consume more orbs to reach the second condition for poison immunity. To achieve it, he must gather the heat energy of the 8 trigrams urn, which will provide the embers required for that goal. Spotting what seems to be a fire lizard nest, he leaps straight into the middle of it. This old foe steps into the Scorpio of the 12 zodiac, gaining the talent to resist all poisons and the ability to refine them into a lethal blood poison. Yet despite holding the strength to challenge Antares, Lee succumbed to Gaia's curse, his divine power rapidly decaying until he was ultimately defeated. By a twist of fate, he found himself in the underworld, where Thanatos taught him part of the fallen star's secret arts. Thanatos had told him to learn as many as possible here, as they would be highly effective against most of the 12 zodiacs and serve him well. The fallen stars, once branded as criminals and cast into the underworld, held deep grudges against the 12 zodiacs who had made countless enemies on their rise to power. Among them, the 10 elders each shared their teachings with Lee. The first was a shortcut to acquiring poison immunity, taught by one who claimed to have lost his daughter to Antares, whom Lee called the First Elder. After defeating countless fire lizards and consuming numerous fire orbs, he kept burping flames, yet thought that his fire energy was still far from enough to ignite the 8 trigrams urn. Lee plans to track down the beast's nest and consume their cores, knowing these creatures are far tougher than before. Meanwhile, Jian battles a beast with fierce determination, cutting down fire lizards one after another. Watching him, Bismarck mutters that this might be his chance to finally surpass Lee. The dungeon rankings appear. Lee holds first place with 7,500 points, followed by Jian with 565, and Park with 150. Stunned, Bismarck wonders how Jian advanced so quickly, suspecting a shortcut. A divine message then appears before him, advising that if the opponent uses a shortcut, he should too. Desperate, Bismarck pleads for power, vowing to do anything. The divine being responds that if this is the resolve of his family, then he shall grant aid. Elsewhere, exhausted fighters slump after slaying lizards, lamenting that the world only favors the gifted and wishing they could grow as strong. After 3 relentless days of monster waves, jealousy toward the stronger fighters intensifies, understandable given how quickly some have risen. John then announces he's gained a new skill, claiming it as an answer to his prayers, a way for them all to become players and survive. Inwardly, he fears everyone will be slaughtered, especially if their foe is the mountain's queen, whom he deems inhuman. At that moment, Lee faces the queen herself, her body blazing and eyes burning red. He leaps high, severs her neck, and consumes the orb. A sudden noise draws his attention to another beast lunging toward a girl. She screams, but Lee intercepts, slicing the creature's neck before asking if she's all right. Still trembling, she sobs about monsters. He reassures her that it's him, Lee, who entered with her, urging her not to be afraid and asking if she's alone. Through tears she hesitates before revealing that everyone, including her friends, was killed, abandoned by someone named Jian. Lee listens as the girl claims she can share the goddess's power, showing a hand marked with an owl. He tells her she's been deceived, explaining it's the brand of a demon, not the true owl seal that pierces the divine talit. Such a mark means that upon death, a branded person's vitality feeds the host while their soul is taken by the demon. He suspects Jian must have grown much stronger from this, noting the brand's high quality, likely from a great demon beyond even Demon King rank, though he remains confident it would still be no match for him. As he moves on, the girl clings to him, begging for help. He brushes her off, reminding her he already saved her from the firework bear, but she pleads again, promising to clean, cook, and do anything in return for strength. Turning to face her, he notices her tearful eyes and realizes she wants revenge for her friend. She offers her last piece of chocolate, but he declines, instead asking if she truly means anything. When she agrees, he says they'll start by altering her brand. Elsewhere, a notification declares that the cursed player Chen Jinwang has died per the brand contract, granting Jian their remaining vitality, soon followed by another similar gain. Jian revels in his increasing strength, pleased at the divine being's approval of his family's growth. As he absorbs vitality, a man approaches nervously, telling him to turn around. When John demands an explanation, the man hesitates, clearly fearful, and mutters that the seal keeps limiting their actions. John yells at his men to run faster and demands to know if they've found what he ordered. One confirms they have, while another silently grits his teeth, feeling enslaved and trapped. John learns the target was hidden in such a place, then commands everyone to get up and prepare for a boss raid. One man vows to himself that he'll throw Jian into the gutter just as Jian once did to him. As a final message notes the divine being watching his family's brooding rage with sharp attention. The girl stares ahead, confused, at a swirling tornado of light when the system screen appears, announcing that multiple people are connected to the attention channel, with 2 currently showing deep instruction in the related dungeon feed. Guards stand nearby, fascinated by a player swiftly clearing the dungeon. Another prompt states she is awaiting her skills awakening. As she walks, a crowd of vacant-eyed people trails behind like zombies, and the screen updates, Ruin of Captivation has successfully ensnared broken souls. Lee suddenly cuts through the horde, slashing each zombie down. She halts and turns to him, and he remarks that she's talented at running away, then says he'll engrave the Ruin of Captivation on her so monsters will target only her. She'll just need to run among them to draw their focus. Telling her not to worry about what happens behind, he continues slicing through the undead until the last one falls. Asking if that was all, she nods and says she gathered every monster within a 300-meter radius. He asks about preparations and she confirms everything works as intended, her eyes bright like an eager puppy. He tells her to get far away, warning she can't handle what's coming next, noting to himself how shiny her eyes look. She beams and runs off. Meanwhile, he watches ahead, thinking the plan should work, but his thoughts break when he senses something heavy approaching, like a dense fume. Realizing it's poison, he covers his mouth. The screen flashes. The final boss, Decomposition Plague Spider, has appeared. The ground cracks as a massive spider bursts upward, leaping high, its sheer size making the girl glance back in shock. In front of the monster, Lee closes one eye, then slowly lifts his hand to reveal bright yellow pupils glowing intensely. One of the spider's legs twists unnaturally, its surface grotesquely shaped from the fused faces and bodies of those who had become zombies. The sight is unsettling. The creature opens its mouth wide, releasing a piercing screech as streams of poison spray forth. Lee holds his stance as the screen flashes. Divine Being, the snake that wraps around the world, regards you highly and grants you a blessing. Skill: Snake Eyes will temporarily evolve into Viper Eyes, allowing vision like a serpent able to pinpoint prey. Instantly you will be able to assess threats in detail and identify crucial points. Skill level: 1. Category: Active. Effect: Grasping key points, sharpening senses. Reading this, Lee thinks that granting such a benefit without conditions means the being wants to see his true abilities. Determined, he decides to show his worth. From his glowing yellow eye, his sharpened vision locks onto a single precise spot on the massive spider. The point he must strike. He decides to start from there, opening his mouth as fire bursts forth, quickly wrapping around his entire body. The screen flashes, low-grade poison resistance activated and leveled up. The accumulated fire energy has burned away the poison in his system. Achievement unlocked, Root of Fire Extinguishing. Having gathered 666 fire orbs, reward granted, fire attribute strengthening, stamina +5. Without hesitation, Lee dashes forward, targeting the spider's leg. His dagger slices through, making the creature screech and vomit blood. While leaping upward, he thinks that to fuel the flames of the 8 trigrams urn, he'll need something highly flammable. Venom burns best, and among all types, the plague spider's venom glands are unmatched. Spotting a swollen gland-like sac near its heart, he grips his sword with both hands and drops onto the spot, driving the blade toward it. But the spider's skin proves too tough and the weapon fails to pierce through. Perched on the spider's back, Lee suddenly feels the surface beneath him shift as a gaping mouth emerges, spewing a torrent of liquid toward him. He leaps away just in time, realizing it isn't poison but acid. Clicking his tongue, he admits that the strength he gained over the past 3 days is far from enough. For now, he decides, retreat is the best option, and he takes off running from the area. Meanwhile, John arrives at the scene to find heaps of slain zombies. His companions murmur in shock, asking what happened, but he grits his teeth, certain this is not Lee's doing. The screen materializes before him, dungeon ranking: 1st, Lee; 2nd, John; 3rd, Park. Lee points, 29,550. John's expression twists in fury. Another message appears. The divine being declares you will not be forgiven for speaking its name despite being its representative. John grinds his teeth at the absurdity, but the screen warns again. The divine being states this is your final chance. Gnawing his nail until blood seeps out, John suspects something is off. No ordinary person could grow this strong so quickly. Whether it's a superior method or outright cheating, he vows to claim it for himself and regain the goddess's favor. A notification flashes before Lee is battling the decomposing plague spider. Rage surges and he bolts forward like a madwoman, shouting he intent to kill him immediately. Meanwhile, Lee sprints through the dungeon with the spider in relentless pursuit. His mind flashes back to the little girl's words, everything was ready. Reaching a certain point, he halts, waiting. As the spider charges in, he smirks, and glowing patterns ignite across the surrounding ruins. A screen message declares the ruin of explosion activated, and a thunderous blast engulfs the area. The notification confirms the decomposing plague spider has been scorched. The divine being, the snake that wraps around the world, erupts in laughter at the brutal trap. Another alert triggers. The ruin of penetration has been activated. From beneath, sharp spikes spear upward, impaling the spider from every angle. The divine being laughs again at the wretched creature writhing in the snare. Achievement unlocked. Rat that's in poison. Gripping a rope, Lee swings up and declares this is only the beginning of his trap. The spider screeches in pain, glaring at Lee as he swings above on a rope. Lee remarks that it truly is the final boss, bleeding heavily, but suddenly something slices the rope, sending him plummeting. He manages to catch himself, while the spider, now on alert, turns to flee. Lee calls out, refusing to let it escape, and leaps forward, closing the gap. From ahead, massive nails shoot toward the spider, piercing its body. Outside the cave, John and his team arrive, their eyes widening at the sight before them. The spider is being torn apart as Lee slashes through it. John quickly decides that joining now would be suicide, thinking it's better to let the two wear each other down and strike at the right moment. Then, a thought hits him. Smirking, he considers forcing the normal people toward Lee, knowing Lee avoids harming them. It would make weakening him much easier, and having an extra card like a hostage could seal their success. John's gaze shifts to a young girl running downhill, confusion flashing through his mind as he wonders if she wasn't supposed to be dead. Did Lee save her? She reaches the bottom, cheering for Lee with awe, calling him amazing. John smirks, thinking this will make things much easier. Below, Lee continues tearing into the massive spider, its grotesque body made from the corpses of countless people now turned into zombies. He drives his sword into its upper shell and a screen flashes. Critical hit. A surge of energy bursts from within, the message declaring that his strike carried the law of increase, wiping out the decomposing plague spider's remaining health. Lee seizes its poisonous gland, lifts it high, and swallows it whole. Veins stand out across his face as a flood of notifications appears. He's leveled up to 20. Breathing heavily, green fumes escape his mouth. Another screen states he has reclaimed the fifth and final section needed for the dungeon mission reclamation, and the final score is calculated, maximum points, 1 lock, bringing his total to 997,450. More alerts follow, noting the growing interest of numerous gods, and that the dungeon will soon close. A divine being known as the snake that wraps around the world mocks other gods for being late, reminding Lee it was the first to show interest. Kneeling to catch his breath, Lee remains unaware as behind the tall stones John watches him, convinced he's too exhausted to rise. John signals to his team, shouting that now is the time. All of them rush toward Lee at once, shouting for everyone to attack him, while John stays hidden among the crowd, deciding not to reveal himself. Lee remains on his knees, head tilted upward, the dungeon behind him slowly closing. As John gets closer, he notices a faint smirk on Lee's face and unease creeps in. He's laughing. A screen flashes, announcing that a divine being bursts into laughter, sensing something interesting about to unfold. Lee rises to his feet, and another notification declares that John and everyone nearby have fallen into a trap. John yells in confusion, demanding to know what this means. Lee meets his gaze with a grin and simply replies, "What else?" He laughs, adding that it means they're screwed. But they ignore him, charging at Lee while John yells for them to kill. Lee grips his dagger, eyes fixed on the oncoming crowd, and begins cutting down anyone who approaches. A sudden system alert appears, escape the ambush, while a divine being watches with growing interest. Fear spreads among John's allies, and after slashing through several of them, Lee closes the distance between them. John raises his dagger with a snarl, their blades clashing hard, but the surge from Lee's weapon knocks John's dagger away. Gritting his teeth, John dodges Lee's next strike, which crashes into the stone and starts hurling people toward him as living shields, shouting for them to stop him. From above, the lieutenant observes, remarking that John is nothing more than a pawn, while the gods have been targeting Lee from the start. The crowd cries out, begging for Lee to save them, pleading to John as well, but John is nothing more than a decoration in Lee's fight, just as it was in the past. A glow suddenly ignites on John's hand as a voice declares that upon John's death, his remaining life force will transfer to the contractor, but the attempt fails. Lee stands before him, driving his dagger forward. John tries to block but can't. Lee's blade pierces into his shoulder, his eyes going wide as he's hurled to the ground, screaming about his arm. Then, in horror, John sees the life force meant for him being absorbed by Lee instead, leaving him stunned at how it's even possible. Lee narrows his eyes at Jian, remarking that his name sounds oddly familiar. Jian's tone sharpens as he asks if he finally remembers him, but Lee admits he still can't recall. The response makes Jian's temper flare. He demands to know how Lee could forget the person whose life he ruined, the one kicked out of the team because of him. A flicker of recognition crosses Lee's face, and he finally recalls the man who once approached him whining about being removed, acting pitiful and pathetic. He points out that this unbecoming side hasn't changed in the slightest, which only fuels Jian's rage. Jian shouts that he is no longer the same man, now blessed with a goddess's support, yet the screen coldly announces that a divine being views its servant as nothing but worthless. The repeated message drives Jian into despair, making him cry out in disbelief, terrified that once again he is nothing but a side character in Lee's story. Another notification declares the sudden quest, escape the ambush, has failed. A deadly flash of Lee's dagger follows, and Jian's mind drifts to the past, back to when Lee stood victorious, raising a trophy as the leader of their team. Regret floods him as he realizes his jealousy and decision to follow Lee had dragged him into this fate. If he had stayed away, he wouldn't have been pulled into this cursed path. He blames Lee entirely, but the screen announces his death penalty before he can act. In the end, Lee finishes him off, and the system broadcasts to all that the cursed player Jian has died. A lifeless body lay on the ground as the screen announced that, under the contract of stigma, the remaining life force would return to its host. Streams of energy began pouring from Jian's corpse, and the crowd murmured in awe at the sheer amount of power rushing toward Lee. A twisted symbol on his neck pulsed, greedily drawing in every strand of lifespan. The scene shifted to an earlier moment. Lee, holding a monster bone knife, worked to alter the stigma seal on a girl's hand, telling her he was making her a host like Jian. He warned that taking such power directly would kill her, but he had crafted a rune beside it to let her receive it safely. A divine being in the form of a serpent encircling the world advised her to absorb the power slowly, as its nature was different from her own, warning that greed could be fatal and sometimes discarding excess was wiser. The same overwhelming surge struck Lee now, the force burning through the symbol at his neck. The screen declared that the divine being was impressed by his ability to hack such a high-level stigma and praised his use of a low-grade rune as an effective medium. Lee smirked to himself, feeling as though he had swallowed a century-old elixir, though he noted the quality left something to be desired. Lee mused that it felt like consuming a century-old elixir, though the quality left much to be desired. Another notification declared that the divine being found the trial both expected and entertaining, now preparing a gift to reward the spectacle. A 5-second countdown began, during which the life force of everyone present was suddenly ripped away, their cries for help echoing. At 0, Lee received a yes or no prompt, and Lieutenant realized with dread what was about to happen. If Lee failed to entertain, all would vanish. Yet Lee, his eyes devoid of emotion, refused without hesitation, shocking Lieutenant and halting the countdown. The divine being expressed confusion, insisting that human lives were useful for gaining magic power and this was simply a reward. Lee replied that he could not trust one whose name remained hidden. The declaration seemed to amuse the entity, who then revealed itself as the great demon Mephistopheles, smiling wickedly. Lee's thoughts froze in alarm. He had made a mistake, but allowed he feigned surprise at the use of great demon as a name. It was revealed that Mephistopheles, one of the mightiest of his kind, was so dangerous that even Tiamat would need preparation to face him, a solitary figure who preferred to remain unseen. While the demon doubted Lee's stated reason, he chose not to press it and instead asked Lee what it was that he truly desired. The red notification flashes, announcing that the divine being Good Season of Hunt fiercely protests against the great demon that chases after the abyss, warning him not to touch Lee as he belongs to her. Lee blinks, thinking her name in fragments, recalling how he thought she had left since she was nowhere to be seen. To think she would keep her guard up against Mephistopheles, almost like a protective mother, leaves him unsure of what to do, yet relieved she returned. Another message declares the dungeon's closing, which had been paused, will now resume, and warns them to brace for impact as a 10-second countdown begins. Amid the chaos, a young girl runs toward Lee, shouting for him to wait, but a screen appears above her stating the target of the Ruin of Captivation has been successfully captivated. She pleads for his contact, but he simply raises a hand and tosses her a bone sword, telling her to take it to the address engraved on the back to completely remove the stigma. He admits he's not skilled with such things and suggests they meet again if fate allows, ending with a brief stay safe. She calls out for him to wait, but the countdown hits 0 and the dungeon collapses entirely. Her eyes shut against the sudden glare, and when she opens them again, she finds herself standing in the middle of town. Voices cry out in excitement. Survivors. There are survivors. It wasn't an outbreak after all. Could it be the dungeon mission was cleared successfully with only a single player? Someone urges to contact headquarters quickly, calling it a scoop. From ahead, her mother and father rush toward her, calling her name, and the three embrace tightly. She feels relief flood her. She survived, but then a thought strikes her, and she wonders where Lee is. Spinning around, she searches for him, but he's nowhere in sight. Her grip tightens on the bone blade he gave her as she silently recalls his face. Somewhere far away under the night sky, Lee sits atop the highest bridge, gazing at the moon. A notification appears, the divine being snake that wraps around the world, remarking that while living a fleeting life has its charm, enjoying a quiet night sky like this is also nice. The great demon that chases after the abyss is still waiting for his answer, and Lee thinks to himself that although the method differs from what they imagined, he has returned. A series of rapid notifications flood the air announcing that the divine being good season to hunt expresses warm hospitality toward deities showing interest, while snake that wraps around the world laughs and licks its tongue, and the great devil that chases after the abysses ignores the welcome, still waiting for his answer. Good season to hunt urges him to listen, and the great devil remains in patient anticipation. As Lee walks along a quiet street under the glow of sunrise, he reflects that attracting 2 or 3 divine beings would have been a success. Yet by clearing the tutorial so thoroughly, he has drawn the attention of far more. Perhaps even for the first time in history, so many gods and stars have taken notice. Another prompt appears declaring a scenario quiz and protection god selection. He can now choose a deity who will grant blessings and power, one who will remain with him until death. Good season to hunt boasts she is the best choice, praising his hunting talent and dagger skill, offering the role of first arrow. Snake that wraps around the world claims compatibility with his cunning and hunger for strength, promising the role of wise enlightenment. The great devil silently waits, offering the role of final observer. Lee considers the most useful among them to be Pablasag, Jormungand, and Mephistopheles, dismissing the rest as unworthy. 4 minutes pass in thought, until a final message arrives. The divine being owl that praises the dusk shows deep favor toward him. He recognizes her as Minerva, the true bearer of the seal Mephisto once claimed. For a god who always upholds justice to entrust herself to him, he realizes she must have taken notice when he broke the seal's template and saved others, restoring balance to a scale that had been tipping toward evil. Lee receives a message stating the righteous and evil scale now stands at 40 to 60, and soon after, notifications pour in as 9 gods impatiently await his choice for a protection star. Without one, he will gain no blessings or powers, falling far behind players of equal level, so the prompt urges him to decide quickly. Time runs out as he stands lost in thought, and the screen declares he has no protection star, unlocking the achievement of an enchanting man who has rejected all divine offers. Several deities grow furious and disgusted by his unending greed, yet his fame rises and his karma jumps by 100,000. Feeling this is harder than surviving the dungeon, he arrives before the World Player Council for Freedom Association, an organization under the Unsafety Management Bureau, formed decades ago to handle the dungeons and gates that overturned Earth's ecosystem, with high-ranking officials wielding vast powers from transformation abilities to investigation rights. Inside, third-class agent Cha-yun bursts in, demanding to know what is going on, while a man seated nearby retorts that it's the press stirring trouble. On the monitor, reporters broadcast the news that the Jamsil break, a major issue for the past 5 days, has finally been resolved. Inside the association, staff calmly state the matter arose despite strict precautions, dismissing it as minor. Critics, however, question if leaving dungeon breaks unattended is wise, noting the association's heavy-handed actions have only heightened public unease. Slamming her fist on the desk, Cha-yun vents about the exhausting 5 days spent leading operations, evacuating residents, securing a perimeter with police and military, and preparing for international aid by personally confronting executives. She demands to know what all that effort amounted to. The man across from her tells her to check the bottom article, which questions the identity of the veiled figure known as L. Turning sharply, she asks where the leak came from, but he instead reminds her that smoking indoors is banned. Irritated, she warns him to read the room before she shuts him up, prompting an apologetic retreat. She insists all outside contact should have been blocked, but he argues it's not that simple. Fortunately, he adds, the press treats the L story like a tabloid rumor. After all, who would believe a rookie closed a 2-star dungeon alone and vanished? She remarks that a civilian becoming a demonic is impossible and insists they contact him before the clans do, but despite combing through surveillance footage, they still can't find him, until another staffer bursts in announcing they've located him. When she demands his location, he answers simply, "At home," leaving them all momentarily puzzled. At his house, Lee steps inside, tossing off his shoes and announcing his return as the family dog barks in greeting. The aroma of freshly prepared food draws him in, and his mother, busy in the kitchen, asks if he's eaten. He replies no, savoring the mouth-watering scent, but she can't help staring at him, fully covered with only his eyes visible. The dog bounds toward him as she continues cooking kimchi. To him, the scent is overwhelming. It's been hundreds of years since he last experienced it, and the sheer nostalgia almost makes his mind go blank. Pulling the dog closer, he laughs softly, greeting it but urging it to stop licking his face. His mother tells him to bathe while she finishes setting the table. As he pets the dog and she returns to cooking, he quietly thinks to himself, after centuries, he is finally home. The table is set with a full spread and Lee sits with his parents, older brother and sister. He thinks to himself that this is exactly why he avoids lingering. His brother rises, saying he's heading out, followed by his sister announcing the same. Lee recalls how his father's side runs a conglomerate with his father inheriting a large hospital, while his mother's side is filled with renowned scholars working in law or diplomacy. As they prepare to leave, their mother asks if they'll be late again. His brother mentions an evening surgery and his sister explains she has a countryside performance, reminding him that she's a decorated musician. Lee compares himself to them, always competitive in youth, obsessed with games, and often treated like an outsider. Now, returning after days away and looking like a beggar, he notices they show no concern. He suspects they prefer to preserve pleasant memories, leaving him emotionally detached from this house. Though the kimchi stew remains irresistible, and he gulps it down. His father suddenly sets his chopsticks down and asks if he plans to stay silent. When Lee says nothing, his mother tries to interject but his father cuts her off. He recounts how when the gates opened, Lee's mother fainted and search parties came fearing he'd been caught inside. His brother called every hospital in Seoul and his sister stayed behind to help search instead of going on her overseas trip. Yet after disappearing for days, Lee only returned to eat in silence, filthy and disheveled. His father's voice rises with anger as he declares that even beasts don't behave so callously, and if Lee intends to live like this, he should leave and stop burdening his mother and siblings. His mother tells the father to stop, saying Lee is probably acting this way because he feels guilty about what happened. Lee begins to speak, but she interrupts, telling him their father was truly worried. The father, still holding his briefcase, declares he's going to work and storms off. From behind she calls out to him but he doesn't stop, slamming the door on his way out. Lee sits in silence until his mother comes over, telling him he knows how his father is. When he's angry, it's best to let him talk without taking it to heart. He agrees, but as he looks at her, he notices the deep wrinkles on her face and realizes how much he's been neglecting her. He had waited for his family to care first, never thinking of approaching them himself. She tells him to rest in his room and he apologizes. Surprised, she asks him to repeat himself, and he turns away saying he's sorry and will be more careful from now on. Entering his room, he finds it in complete disarray, empty bottles, trash, scattered papers, and socks all over the floor. He starts cleaning, muttering about how he's been living like this. The family dog wanders in from the gate, barking, and he hugs it tightly, wondering how to untangle this complicated knot in his life before deciding to start with cleaning. Meanwhile, on the road, a yellow Lamborghini speeds past like a racing beast. From inside another car, a man exclaims over the rarity of the model, shocked at how his companion could afford it on her salary. Cha casually explains she takes many contract jobs which he accuses of being illegal. She ignores it, thinking she's looking forward to seeing how Elle is doing. Back in his room, Lee finishes cleaning and collapses on the bed, relieved. A game-like message flashes. The divine being has found a good season to hunt and is interested in what he'll do next, offering help to improve his hunting skills. Another, the snake that wraps around the world, tells him rest is also important. Lee finds it strange they care about such things, but thoughts of his family return, his brother, sister, mother, and father. He resolves to show them he's different now, no longer the drunk who lives off others, but an adult who can pull his weight. If he focuses on being a player, he's sure their hearts will open to him again. The earnings are better than expected, and he realizes he can start his second plan sooner than planned. That Void Monarch guy should be here soon. Lee recalls his earlier conversation with Thanatos, asking who he should target first in the mundane world, and the answer comes without hesitation: the ruler of his own world. When Lee presses for details, Thanatos names someone he knows all too well, a tiger trapped in hardship. The thought instantly dampens Lee's mood as he remembers one of his greatest enemies, a man who had stood at his divine punishment trial and laughed in his face. This opponent is cunning, fierce as a tiger, quick to sense danger, and surrounded by many loyal underlings. A sudden message arrives: the white tiger is always beside you as you smile. Then comes another recruitment notice. The White Tiger clan will be recruiting new players this month. The name alone makes Lee pause. Since the gates began opening, countless gods and celestial beings have appeared on Earth, and with them, groups blessed and baptized by divine power. These groups are known as clans. The White Tiger clan's patron saint is none other than White March, whose naming sense is terrible. Simply because he's a white tiger, he called both himself and his clan by that name. Despite the simplicity, the clan is massive, ranked first in Korea. Lee knows he can't challenge them head-on yet. Without the strength to start a war, he'll need to dismantle his enemy piece by piece from the shadows, cutting away support without drawing attention. To do that, all preparations must be complete within a month. Lee tells his mother he's heading to the park near the Han River and will return early, assuring her not to worry. Taking a cab to a secluded location, he wonders if this is the right place but reminds himself that what he's about to attempt cannot be interrupted by anyone, human, animal, or otherwise. A sudden stomach discomfort from overeating kimchi stew makes him pause, considering handling it like in the dungeon, but instead he opts for the cabin's washroom, remarking that it's been centuries since he's used a toilet. After relieving himself, he breathes out in satisfaction and ventures deeper into the forest, eventually reaching a silent clearing. Certain the spot is far enough, he slices his palm with a dagger, triggering a glow from a nearby tree. A screen declares the rune of shield has been deployed, and an invisible barrier forms. Removing his clothes to keep them clean for later, he opens his inventory, revealing items such as a bone spear carved from a firework's ribs, 13 pieces of mountain gold, a shield from a fire slayer, 21 salamander skulls, a bloody mamba's poison fang, 9 firework tiger toenails, an ice kite's poison beak, 2 burrowing scorpion stingers, and a plague spider's poison gland. One by one he consumes each, fusing their essence into his body while thinking that venom makes the best spark to ignite a great blaze. The pure fire energy building inside him, known for repelling poison and purging evil, burns as a force of absolute purification. Lee suddenly finds himself in a vast galaxy-like space where several mysterious entities stand before him. An old man explains that once any foreign substance threatening the body is detected, the fire will burn it to ashes, and the stronger the substance, the fiercer the flames. This is when it becomes the fire of the 8 trigrams. As it burns away all foreign matter, it also purges accumulated waste, making it the most thorough method of cleansing the body. Deciding he has enough fire, Lee chooses to begin with his heart. A surge of green energy strikes it, and intense pain erupts through him. A system prompt flashes: Bloody Mamba's poison fang has infiltrated his heart, and the venom spreads rapidly. His veins bulge visibly as another prompt warns that low-grade poison resistance is active but insufficient. Agonizing pain racks him as he cries out. The system urges immediate detoxification, then declares that he has fully absorbed the Bloody Mamba's poison fang, uncovering a hidden piece and gaining the snake venom gene, allowing him to produce a small amount of that venom. 50,000 karma is deposited into his achievement points, but he remains in critical condition. Next, the firework tiger's burned toenail invades his liver and intestines. The divine being good season to hunt is horrified, questioning if he has anything to save himself. The divine being snake that wraps around the world reacts with surprise at the hidden piece discovery, suspecting Lee has another trick prepared. The divine being greatest demon that chases the abyss waits silently for his answer, while the divine being owl that pierces through the twilight cheers him on. The burrowing scorpion's stinger pierces into his spine, pushing his body closer to collapse. Still enduring, Lee takes the plague spider's poison gland, squeezing it into his mouth. A notification states it has permeated his lungs, revealing another hidden piece. All 5 of his major internal organs are now filled with venom. His entire body turns black and green as the system reports that 5 different poisons are clashing violently within him, pushing his poisoned state to a dangerously severe level. Lee forces himself forward, muttering that he just needs to hold on a little longer. The screen flickers with a warning. Low-grade poison resistance activated, endured, ineffective. A red alert follows, urging immediate treatment or death will follow. He refuses to stop, gasping that it's not yet over. Again, the system warns that all bodily functions are paralyzed, but he opens his mouth and releases a surge of yellow energy. Mana begins to flow rapidly, feeding into the dormant fire within him. As his mouth parts wider, an enormous burst of flame erupts outward, engulfing him. The notification chimes. His fire has awakened. Flames rage violently, wrapping around his entire body. Another message appears, congratulating him for igniting the long-forgotten legendary ancient sacred fire. The fire of the 8 trigrams. His body begins to recover, regenerating at a rapid pace. The poisonous energy inside is torn apart, all impurities eradicated, and both his blood and energy are renewed. All of Lee's meridian pathways and veins are fully opened, his magic power organs steadily regenerating. He gains a magic power brazier along with the attributes of fire and poison. The system rewards him with the Phoenix that rose from the ashes achievement, granting all stats +5, continuous purification, and the blood poison skill. Smiling at his work, he mutters that it's done and he now has immunity to 10 poisons. Opening the system window, he scans through his stats, already thinking about acquiring a weapon next. Meanwhile, at Lee Cha's home, she greets a man who arrives with a companion, asking if this is Lee's residence. Inviting them in, they find another man already seated on the sofa, remarking that the association is slow as ever, though faster than expected, and greeting her as Agent Cha. She wonders what's going on, her gaze shifting to the man standing behind him, Wu Youngin, the sword of the Wisdom Clan and head of human resources, also known as Black Shamshir. The man on the sofa adds that this is why the Iron Rise bowels are no good, and she realizes he is Seo Jangkwon, the saber-toothed tiger and second leader of the White Tiger Clan riding team. She thinks she may have been too cautious. In Sungsu neighborhood's Shoemaker Alley, Lee enjoys a cheese corn dog, thinking how nothing compares to filling himself with food compared to magic power. Remembering what he's heard, that the trade twilight of the god is the king of weapons, his mind drifts back to an earlier talk with Thanatos. Back then he asked if he'd need a wide range of weapons upon return, and Thanatos agreed, saying a skilled blacksmith would be essential. When Lee wondered if such a person existed, Thanatos assured him one did. Now standing before a shop, Lee is approached from behind by a man inviting him to come take a look. He faces the store, noticing it's in ruins with its signboard snapped in half. The man explains it has been closed for more than 5 years, leaving Lee uncertain of what to do next. Lee stands before the chained and locked shop, noting it has been closed for 5 years, yet the faint scent of divine fire drifts out, suggesting a high-quality brazier inside. He leans closer, inhaling the aroma seeping through the cracked shutter. A screen appears stating that the divine being Good Season to Hunt is intrigued, claiming she too smells fine steel from within. Convinced, Lee uses his strength to snap the chains and lift the shutter, revealing rows of weapons. As he steps inside, the screen relays her excitement, declaring no place could be closer to paradise than this workshop. She marvels at the craftsmanship, her voice sharp as she scolds him for ignoring the gleaming pieces and instead focusing on a rusted, battered blade. Lee picks up the worn sword, ignoring her pleas to toss it aside and check the other weapons. His attention shifts when he notices a blind man entering with a guide dog. Meanwhile, back at Lee's house, his mother serves fruit to the 4 guests, prompting them all to silently admire her grace. Cha muses that a true actress carries herself differently. SEO remarks that rookie values have skyrocketed lately, from team leader to department head in no time, which feels absurd. Cha finds it strange, thinking such people wouldn't personally act just to recruit a rookie, though things might be different for a super rookie. She notes everything is happening in just one day. The White Tiger Clan, Korea's strongest in battle power, has team leader Seo Jungkwon, a man who wears a fake mustache believing all strong warriors should have one. Then there's the 5-star Sword Clan, which began as a subsidiary of a major corporation and quickly grew into a large clan. Their human resources head, Wu Younggun, uncle to survivor Wu Haiban, is also here. She wonders if all this is truly just for one super rookie like Lee, certain they'll block others from recruiting him if they fail to do it themselves. Speaking up, she says they all seem busy, so why are they here? Seo replies that if he doesn't come, people might think he's freeloading. Moving closer, he asks if she plans to interfere in their business. She retorts they were the ones who interfered first, stealing their secret. He accuses her of abusing authority, but she snaps back that he's the one obstructing official duties. Their heated back and forth is observed by Lee's mother, who bluntly asks if both are here to recruit her son. They answer yes. Cha claims the Sword of Wisdom can give him systematic training, while Seo begins to speak about the Tiger Clan but gets cut off. The mother interrupts, saying the choice belongs to Lee, so they shouldn't be talking to her. Instead, she wants to ask something else. Both look puzzled. She continues, saying they were told her son spent the last 5 days in the gemstone dungeon, and she'd like to hear what happened there and what he did. Meanwhile, at the broken shop, Lee sits across from a blind man with his dog, stating he wants a weapon made. The man calls him strange, wondering why he'd ask despite his condition, and questions why Lee would trust him. The divine being good season to hunt agrees with the man, nodding furiously and doubting the weapons here were made by him, but the world-encircling snake tells her to shut up and watch. The man rises, telling Lee if he's here to mock him, he's done enough and should leave, as the blacksmith shop has been closed for years. Calling to his Doberman, he says, "Let's go, Wilson." Lee points out that despite all the man's denial, his brazier is still burning and the fresh calluses on his right hand give him away. The man brushes it off, but Lee remarks that he must be struggling financially and should at least ensure his loyal companion, who now serves as his eyes, doesn't go hungry. The man stays silent, unable to deny it, as Wilson's thin frame speaks for itself. Lee offers 10 million won for each completed request, promising an extra 50 million upon finishing everything, regardless of quality, and an even bigger bonus if the results exceed expectations. He asks for the man's account number, and within a minute the money lands in his bank. The man, surprised, mutters in thought about the deposit, but Lee clarifies it's a down payment, not an advance, and asks if it's enough. The man bluntly demands 5 million more to cover overdue rent, and Lee sends it without hesitation. When the man finally asks what he should make, Lee interrupts, calling him boss. The man stares in shock, asking what he means, and Lee smirks, telling him that since he has taken the money, he's the promiser and Lee is the promise, so from now on he should call Lee boss. The man confirms the list of weapons: a 5-meter whip, an assemble-able long spear, 5 massive axes, a small hand axe, various swords, and a shield, asking if that's all. Lee adds a bow with arrows and mentions plans for future armor. The man refuses, but Lee instantly transfers 100 million won for materials, warning that if the contract is broken, triple the amount must be repaid, so he shouldn't say it's impossible. The man curses in frustration, but Lee calmly notes he hears that often. When the man questions why he trusts him despite this being their first meeting, Lee agrees it is, then adds that the man is a nobody, disadvantaged by his disability, yet it's the requester who should be cautious, not the craftsman. He says the deal is simple: make the items, get paid. The man accepts but warns it's difficult. Time is short. His skills with iron are rusty and every requested item is troublesome. Worse, he lacks the special hammer needed for his brazier. Lee asks if someone took it from him. The man explains that after his father died, his senior brother, once his father's disciple, joined a powerful clan and stole the hammer once used by his father. Lee calls it poor judgment in trusting such a person and asks about the clan. The man says it's Hyoff, one of the top 10 clans. When Lee hears this, he stands, declaring he'll retrieve it and asks for the location. The man warns it's too dangerous, but Lee says it doesn't matter since removing everyone there will erase all evidence. The man feels as though he's being pulled deeper into Lee's pace, thinking that if it's the boss, then maybe it's possible. He finally reveals it's hidden in a grave at Seoul's Jongryang-gu, on Manhwa Mountain. When Lee arrives, he finds a sprawling city-like area with countless buildings. Leaping onto a pillar near the rugged mountainside, he spots a cave and recalls the Uyezi's words about the senior brother in Hyoff. There's only one reason they would have brought in Jin Daewon: to open a grave. Hyoff had long been after a dungeon shaped like a tomb, secretly plotting to access its final room. Lee suspects it's sealed like a lock and that they recruited Jin because they couldn't find the way in themselves. He wonders what kind of place it is and figures that if it's that well hidden, the reward inside must be worth the trouble. It's 8:40 p.m. when he takes out his phone and messages his mother that he'll have dinner outside. Deciding to learn more about Hyoff, he searches and finds they're tied to countless crimes: drugs, trafficking, kidnapping, assassinations, pure trash. With that, he thinks it's fine to wipe them all out. A message appears. The owl that pierces the twilight praises his sense of justice and grants a special benefit: an unbinding spirit-type blessing with mind immunity and iron will. He mutters it's a misunderstanding, wishing instead for the discerning eyes or the goddess's blade and dagger. Another message flashes. Good season to hunt is thrilled for the coming battle, while the snake that wraps around the world is eager to see him fight Hyoff. He takes out a laughing ha-ho mask with a restrictive recombination effect, puts it on, and readies a pair of blades forged from ice kite feathers. He says he doesn't want to kill them too quickly. From atop a pillar, he hurls the blades at a guard. Though they sense something coming, the strike is too fast. The blades pierce their foreheads and freeze their bodies solid. He leaps down, slicing them into countless pieces while laughing, then says this isn't enough and they need to suffer more. Cutting his own hand, he presses his blood into their frozen faces, merging his blood poison with the ice, creating an ice poison that seeps into them. A screen announces the poison's enhancement thanks to the ice kite feather daggers. He repeats the process on all of them, their screams echoing as agony consumes them. He reflects on how quickly he's used this skill after gaining poison immunity, noting that the combined ice and blood poison is far stronger. Another message shows Good Season to Hunt enjoying his work. Climbing the stairs, he tells them not to bother detoxifying, just die painfully. Their pleas for mercy go unanswered as the poison burns through them, and the snake that wraps around the world marvels at his recklessness, watching intently. Lee steps through the gate, a message declaring entry into the dungeon, Besla tomb. Another notification states he has gained visibility thanks to the laughing Haho mask, prompting him to think this must be why Uyezi the Uyezi lent it to him, likely so he could reach the brazier in front of the boss room often and craft keys. He considers claiming the boss room reward while he's here, but his thoughts are cut short when a mission alert appears. The dungeon's theme is Rob the Grave, requiring him to defeat the guardian protecting Besla tomb and steal treasures from the final chamber where the tomb's honor rests. The structure is split into 3 vast sections, each filled with traps designed to guard the grave's sanctity. The divine being, Good Season to Hunt, expresses excitement over his next move. Lee moves forward when another screen pops up asking what's wrong. Confused, he orders someone to come out while staring at one of the walls. Nothing happens, and the system responds that no one is present, questioning his behavior. He warns that if they won't come out, he'll have to pass this to the next administrator he meets. A voice finally responds, amused at how bold he is, and assures him it's fine to relax. A bunny-like administrator peeks through the wall, repeating the same easygoing remark. Introducing himself as Herald, Dungeon Ambassador, he complains that Lee is mean and that everyone else knew he was here. The gods react, Good Season to Hunt fumes, other gods mock, pity, or show mild sympathy. She gasps in disbelief when Herald's stealth is praised, but Herald insists he used nothing special. Lee cuts the chatter, guessing Herald's here to write a report. Surprised, Herald wonders how a novice knows about such things, since reports track the god's key interests in detail. Sitting at a small table, Herald starts typing notes about the rookie who has drawn massive attention from the heavens, pressure from the Bureau, and who even caught him in stealth. If the recording rights were transferred, Herald fears trouble. Lee casually offers them, stunning Herald with the gesture. In return, Lee asks a favor, security-related. Herald agrees but warns he can't exceed his authority. Lee accepts, sealing the deal just as a loud click and a message announce a mana covenant between them. Herald sweats, convinced Lee isn't a novice at all, perhaps even a veteran. With that, Lee moves deeper into the tomb. From behind Herald, a voice orders him to follow, and the screen flashes that the snake that wraps around the world is delighted to find someone even sillier than itself. The scene shifts to deep inside the dungeon where a furious man is shouting, calling the current attempt a failure. Slamming his fist against the wall, he curses at how badly things were handled, yelling that punishment is certain and he might even be offered as a sacrifice. He orders Jin Dawen to be brought before him at once. 2 men drag Jin in as he begs for mercy. The man accuses him of yet another failure, calling him the disciple who stole the hammer. Thrown to the ground, Jin pleads with the department head to spare him, claiming he only needs more blood to succeed, but is met with a kick to the face and a reminder that every resource he asked for had already been given. The man questions why he should keep him alive when his own life is at risk. Jin insists the sacred fire provided was used in the new brazier he mentioned, but the man grits his teeth, blaming himself for trusting him. Jin quickly denies fault, blaming the failure on a lack of time and blood, and begs for one more chance. Skeptical, the man asks if blood is truly all he needs. Jin confirms, explaining that of the 3 lock stages, he has already unlocked the second, but the blood ran out earlier than expected, causing the failure, so he just needs more to finish the job. The man reluctantly agrees to give him one last chance but warns that if he fails again, both he and his family will be torn apart. As the man turns to leave, a system notification appears before him announcing new data added and an updated ranking system. Rank 1 Jung Yu Jin 150,000 PT, Rank 2 Go Seongwon 145,000 PT, Rank 3 Lee Jesung 109,500 PT, Rank 57 Lee Changshin. Herald's fingers flew across the keyboard as he typed, describing player Lee as a truly exceptional talent. Various gods and constellations, along with good season to hunt, are watching him closely. He narrates Lee's unique combat style, noting that in this dungeon, Lee moves with uncanny precision. Suddenly, a blast echoes and Harold grabs his laptop, running toward the source. Ahead, Lee stands in front of a massive metal sphere hurtling toward him. Harold notes that in under 30 minutes, Lee cleared 2 of the dungeon's 3 sections. Not only does he cut through the metal ball as it approaches, but he also deflects arrows coming from every direction without even looking, as if memorizing the trap's locations and timing. Harold recalls that dungeon KR 921 has gone uncleared for 4 years, yet Lee might succeed. Years of experience as an ambassador tell him this player is extraordinarily perceptive, talented, and perfect in trade. He speculates that the battle among gods and constellations to sway Lee's allegiance will intensify. Lee's abilities have already captured the attention of 12 constellations across 28 dimensions. Typing while observing Lee, Harold realizes he reminds him of someone from the past. He notes that this report might make a few gods frown, yet the light of the gods, the brilliance mocked by many deities and constellations in ages past, seems to shine anew in him. The scene shifts to Lee's past, when he was an inheritor of a god, chained atop a pillar, glaring at a void monarch and thinking, "How dare you scoff at me?" Back in the present, Lee slices through the dungeon's traps effortlessly, each one lethal enough to kill anyone caught. The screen alerts that good season to hunt senses a foul stench in the air. Lee identifies it as blood, and the owl that races through the twilight warns him that evil radiates from every corner. Entering another hallway, he sees piles of bodies and blood everywhere, and the owl commands him to execute justice. Lee muses about the boss room key and what deceptive files were offered, when a distant voice shouts at the captives to move faster. 2 guards herd them through the alleyway, one suggests beheading a few to hurry them along, while the captives plead for mercy. Suddenly both guards freeze in an instant. Lee has arrived. He cuts them down with precision. One man lunges with a sword but Lee dodges, landing a fatal strike and embedding a dagger in his shoulder. The man cries, pleading, claiming allegiance to High Off, while Lee's gaze reveals something inhuman. Lee demands information. How many? How powerful? What's happening inside? In pain, the man reveals 30 participants in the ritual and mentions Lee Jisung as the only threat. Lee reminds him that sharing information is the only way to live, then equips the dagger crafted from a firework tiger fang and finishes the man, leveling up in the process. The screen shows the snake that wraps around the world laughing at the display, while the great demon chasing Abyssus nods, impressed by Lee's audacity. Using authority Soul Re, Lee siphons the man's lifespan into himself, then strides past the remaining captives, who stare in awe at the swirling purple energy, whispering, "Is he a ghost?" In the corridor, 3 men walked, talking about Lee Chengxion, the name their boss ordered them to find. One mentioned he'd heard it before, another recalled a famous pro gamer, now supposedly a vegetable, and the third guessed it was someone else with the same name. Unaware that Lee was right behind them, they were suddenly struck by his dagger. Their startled cries were cut short as a massive blast erupted. Yezyung, hearing the commotion, spun around, confused and angry that his targets hadn't arrived. The screen notified a dungeon ranking update. Lee jumped from 11th to 2nd rank in an instant, infuriating Jaezyung, who shouted in disbelief. A man nearby cried for help, and Jaezyung called out to him, but the son seemed possessed. His eyes rolled back, saliva dripped, veins glowed, and his chest erupted with heavy yellow light, knocking Jaezyung backward. The screen warned that he had suffered a terrible burn injury, was poisoned by corpse acid, and was rapidly losing stamina, perilously close to death. Frantically, Jaezyung pulled out a small antidote box, only to turn and see his inevitable death approaching. Lee himself. Lee lunged at Jaezyung, blade cutting through the air, but Jaezyung blocked it with his sword. Lee thought he was fully poisoned and should be slowed, yet Jaezyung roared, "I will kill you," and slashed relentlessly. Lee dodged, impressed that even blinded by poison, he could sense and react to Lee's movements. A warning flashed, stamina depleting rapidly, detoxify immediately. Lee mused that someone at level 30 shouldn't be this skilled. Maybe he was enhancing his power somehow. It was strange that such a peaceful country harbored this much danger and continued human sacrifices. Jaezyung desperately sought an antidote, and Lee realized there were deeper secrets here. Reinforcements from headquarters were due, and the sacrifices were about to begin. A group entered a chamber, men shouting for everyone to gather. The door slammed behind them. Lee, recalling the past, instructed the tied captives. Go left after passing 2 doors. The 3rd door on the side will open. Hide inside, close it, and no matter what you hear, stay hidden. Only then could they survive. The screen appears saying Authority Soul Exhaustion has been activated, and with that Lee starts consuming the soul of Jaeseung. The screen appears saying the Flame of Purgatory has been activated and you have succeeded in acquiring player Lee Changxian's soul. Your stamina has recovered by 6. Divine Being Al that pierced through the twilight is deeply impressed by your righteousness. It has given you a privileged inner peace, Lee thought. What's that? The screen explained inner peace. One who possesses this will not falter in the face of any chaos. Take pride in your wisdom and courage, Lee thought, even considering unbending the spirit to think I do get inner peace. I am not some kind of apostle. The spark came in Lee's face as he thought of his previous life, thinking forever cruel and vicious. I am I who was called an evil god. Although he is said to be a wise and intelligent warrior god, contrary to the terrifying rumor about him, he is surprisingly sloopy. The screen appears saying divine being or good season to hunt a feast, and she is on seeing the 2 privileges granted to you by Al that precise through the twilight. She is rummaging through her treasure chest to see if there is a privilege she can grant you, Lee thought. Although I do not think I have become as much as a pushover as this one, the screen said that dungeon ranking has been upgraded. Lee was on the first, and finally Lee has arrived in front of the boss room. Standing in front of the huge door, he said, "This is it," but the screen said the door of the boss room is currently tightly shut. The key is hidden somewhere. Find it and unlock the door. Lee hurled the bone spear, crafted from the shaving of the firework mountain goat's rib, toward the left where Daiwan was standing. It slashed on the Daiwan's chest. He stepped closer, eyes scanning, muttering that he moved like a rat. His gaze landed on the hammer, and the screen blinked a warning. Unknown hammer, appears to be made from meteor, discovered after many years. As he gripped it, a notification cautioned that since he was not its owner, he could not use it. Lee frowned, thinking meteor, but decided it was better to focus on opening the boss room door that Hyoff had failed to unlock for years. If it were Uyezi, he might have fashioned a key somehow, yet Lee saw no need for unnecessary effort. When a better method existed, he called aloud, "Harold, come out." Harold appeared, asking why he summoned her at such a moment. Lee replied firmly, reminding her of their agreement, and ordered her to open it immediately. Harold warned that as a novice Lee might not know, but administrators are forbidden from interfering in dungeon missions. Lee cut him off, telling him to drop the excuses. Rules can be bent depending on the situation. Harold fell silent and began moving forward. Lee added that if he didn't want to act, he wouldn't bother forcing him, and he might skip writing the report as well. Harold nodded, agreeing to follow Lee's command. The screen noted that Good Season to Hunt was delighted to see the administrator's compliance, clutching her sides in amusement, while Snake that wraps around the world admired Lee's cleverness. Harold stopped before the door, muttering he might be punished, hoping it would be no worse than a pay cut. The screen confirmed the stone door, previously sealed, had been opened by Harold's authority. A faint glow spilled from inside as Harold smirked, telling Lee the way was clear. Lee stepped in, and the door closed behind him. The screen announced he had entered the boss room. Before him stood a creature with countless eyes covering its body, and the screen warned that a curse was beginning to take effect. The dungeon master would attempt to steal his body, and he had to resist while breaking the golden castle atop the altar. The creature began chanting, demanding worship and awe, signaling the start of its brainstorming assault. The creature inside the boss room bellowed, demanding Lee hand over his flesh, and scorned him for daring to disturb the king's slumber. Outside, Harold chuckled nervously, remarking that the mission wouldn't be easy, explaining that the boss room required guarding one's mind against the tomb's master, whose enormous presence survived only through thought. Harold mused that perhaps even a novice couldn't withstand it. The screen flashed, announcing that Unbending Spirit had been activated, fortifying Lee's mind against intrusion, followed by Inner Peace, further protecting him. Harold felt a twinge of unease as the dungeon mission was suddenly marked complete. The final rankings appeared. First place went to Lee Changxiang with 175,550 points, and the screen confirmed rewards would be distributed accordingly. Harold's disbelief grew as the dungeon prepared to close, 5, 4, 3, and he realized that inside the boss room Lee stood before the altar holding a key. Harold muttered in defeat, "I failed." The dungeon sealed entirely. Outside in the alleyway, Lee handed the hammer to the Uyezi, instructing him to start production. Chewing his food, he said, "Call me boss, I brought your hammer so you can begin." The Uyezi agreed, but reminded him that a month wouldn't be enough. He needed to regain his feel for the hammer and clean the brazier. Lee cut him off with a sharp, 1-week deadline. The Uyezi's eyes widened, just mastering the whip alone would take over 2 weeks. plea was cut off as Lee declared, "For mastering the hammer, the whip, and the lens, I'll give you a month, and I'll pay 3 times the usual amount for the effort." Holding a rusted sword he'd had his eye on, he added, "I'll take that as a yes. I'll be back in a month. Is this for sale too?" "I'll take it." The Uyezi refused, saying it was a family heirloom passed down through generations, but his phone pinged. 100 million won had been deposited. Stunned, he muttered, "What is that bastard's deal?" Petting his dog and closing the door, he removed his shirt and murmured, "Whatever the past, let's do this properly." As Lee walked down the street, his thoughts drifted to a conversation with Thanatos. He'd asked if the Uyezi was in Seoul and if he should seek him out. Thanatos explained that all contact with the Uyezi was lost after creating Capricorn's divine artifact and that he was far too old to be human. The name Uyezi was originally a single man whose successor, Capricorn, immediately killed him after receiving the artifact, unaware the legacy survived. Many of the Uyezi's secret skills had been lost over time due to these circumstances, and the family's capabilities had deteriorated. Yet the weapons that remained were still extraordinary, some of only a handful in existence. Lee thought, with Thanatos' guidance, a modern Uyezi could truly blossom under my hands. Holding the key in his hand while sitting in the car, Lee thought, Pedro's key is supposed to be a dungeon. If the dungeon is Besla tomb, why would the greatest treasure inside be called Peter's key? It's too late now and his mother is probably worried, so he decided to head home. Meanwhile, in a tense office, a man slammed his hand on the table, shouting, "What about the guy who closed the dungeon? Did you find him?" The officers standing before him shook their heads, saying no. The man barked, "Just what are you doing?" "Find him, dead or alive." He was Go Seong-wan, head of the high-off raid department. Clenching his teeth, he thought, I must retrieve Peter's key at all costs. Damn it, if Donghua Mountain gains real honor and the White Tiger clan finds out, we're finished. We had to use a human sacrifice to obtain Peter's key, bound by a secret contract. He shouted, "Get the car ready, we're going to Donghua Mountain immediately." I cannot believe this. Not only was the dungeon closed, but Peter's key was stolen from us. If the White Tiger finds out, it won't end with my life alone. Especially if that SEO Yungkwon discovers it, my entire family will be at risk. I cannot leave this unresolved. I have to find it, no matter what. In Lee's house, a man leaned close to Seo and whispered something that instantly enraged him. Yellow energy swirled around Seo, his aura shifting violently. He shouted, demanding to know what had been said, while Cha urged him to calm down, and the mother watched, slightly frightened. The man asked, "What are you doing, team leader Seo?" Clenching his teeth, Seo's anger barely held as the man approached, scolding him for using a tiger evil spirit in the presence of civilians. Seo glanced at the mother, composed but visibly tense, and said, "It's getting late, and since Lee doesn't seem to be coming home tonight, he would be heading back." Cha asked if he was alright, and the mother assured them she was fine, remarking on how the awakened live in a world apart from theirs, wondering if their youngest shared that nature, brusque outside but delicate within. She wished he wouldn't get hurt, though that seemed unlikely, and told them to leave. As they departed, the man thanked Seo, noting that his intervention had prevented a serious problem. He asked Cha and Jin what they planned to do next, recalling the little girl's plea to bring Lee back. Offering coffee, the man teased about Jin's order for a hot caramel mojito, but Cha dismissed it, explaining they had other matters and would need to return later. The men nodded in understanding as Cha and Jin walked toward the lift, Jin noticing her serious expression. Then Cha's phone rang, displaying a notice. Seoul Yungnang-gu Donghua Mountain. Victims intended for human sacrifice were being secretly sheltered and were currently at a local police station awaiting support to prevent collateral damage. Cha told Jin to hurry or she would leave without him, prompting him to run after her. Meanwhile, Lee gripped a rusted sword, thinking that an item long used as kindling in a mystical brazier could hardly be ordinary. The legendary divine artifact, Yu Chang's sword, had been treated so carelessly. If he wielded the evil dragon Snaggletooth alongside Yu Chang's sword properly, nothing in the player world could rival them. This screen notifies saying Yu Chang's sword, one of the 9 famous blades forged by the first Aoyezi, referred to as a divine artisan. The 9 famous blades which define Aoyezi are absolutely priceless. Actually, after one of the 9 famous blades, the Xuan Lu sword, had appeared on Arcadia. A bloody war had broken out over it in the aftermath of that war. I think 2 enemies and 6 kingdoms had fallen into ruin. Who would have thought that one of those famous swords would be used as a kindling? The original owner of the Yuchang sword was an assassin, so they say that this blade drew the most blood out of the 9 famous swords. It's considered as an evil sword full of the incredible resentment and tenacity of its victims, but because of that, much is known about its appearance. There was also talk about the first Uyezi being called a divine artisan because he hated seeing blood. I do not know if it was the first Uyezi or the successor coming after him bearing his name, but it seemed like all recognizable patterns on it had been removed in order to erase it from this world, leaving it just as a way to preserve the mythology. The screen appears saying, "Divine God, good season to hunt," is grumbling about why you are so happy holding something that weird, sneering to yourself. Owl that praises through a tall light looks upon you with satisfaction. He said, "I guess gathering all of you Yezi's 9 famous swords would be nice if I ever have a chance. I wonder if I will ever meet him." He holds the bone spear in his hand. There was a static picture silently there. And then something was strange. He threw his blade straight on the front. Lee slammed his blade into a tree trunk pillar, making it clearly visible. The man standing nearby muttered that Lee had gone too far even if he was trying to hide his presence. Without hesitation, the man lunged, but Lee didn't pause. He ran straight at him with his dagger. Their eyes locked and the man's widened in surprise as he blocked Lee's strike with his sword. He muttered in disbelief at the rookie's strength. Lee stepped back, readying another attack. The man clenched his teeth, noting that while Lee's swordsmanship was crude and lacked flourish, it had no wasted motion, every strike lethal, honed in real combat. He was no rookie. Lee's relentless slashes forced the man to reflect. This fighter reminded him of a first-generation player hardened by hardship. He had approached merely to test Lee, but now any misstep would disgrace him. Though sure his niece would scold him later, he felt the need to fight with everything he had. "I want to scout you for my clan," he thought. "I like to scout you." The man thrust his sword forward, thinking it was the only way to properly face this rookie. As he planted the sword on the ground, a surge of blue energy burst from it. The screen noted that 10,000 nodes had been bent into the strike. He swung at Lee, but nothing affected him, and instantly Lee's blade was inches from the man. He quickly raised his hand, pressing his sword to the ground, declaring surrender. Lee gritted his teeth, demanding what he was doing. The man muttered internally that he had nearly lost himself, then spoke aloud, apologizing for mindlessly provoking Lee and explaining he only wanted to gauge his skill. Lee stood firm as the man continued, admitting he got carried away and apologizing for the misunderstanding. Lee asked who he was. The man, somewhat flustered by Lee's directness, controlled himself and offered a card, introducing himself as Wu Youngjin, head of human resources at 5-Star Sword. Actually, the reason he had called out was because he genuinely wanted to scout him in his clan. Lee thought about their deity, the nameless giant god, realizing its true name was Apavong, a god of wealth that often guards a household's storerooms and assets. Experiencing all this so suddenly, he wasn't particularly pleased, but more importantly, he wondered how Wu knew who he was. Wu explained that Lee hadn't yet realized how famous he'd become. Many clans across the country, not just theirs, were paying attention. Lee thought they had moved far faster than expected. He shouldn't underestimate them just because they were players. Wu added he wished he could speak longer, but having made a grave mistake today, he would contact Lee again once his anger had settled, and left, telling him to reach out if anything arose. A screech reminded Lee that good season to hunt was nagging him for letting go of someone picking a fight. Wu reacted, thinking of her oath to never lose, jumping about as tension built. Lee's mind wandered. He felt he'd seen Wu's face before, maybe somewhere before going to Arcadia. If someone like him was here, could they be at his house too? He worried for his mother, turning toward home. Meanwhile, Wu moved in the opposite direction, blood dripping from his hand. Lee entered his home, calling out to his mother, who interrupted, noting he was back and hadn't eaten yet, instructing him to wash his hands first and then take a seat, asking if he had something he wanted to say. Lee said to his mother that there was something he wanted to say. A vision from his past life flashed before him. He was standing amid fire, a battlefield around him. Even so young, his face already carried a full killing intent. He spat at the old man in front of him, warning him to back off if he didn't want to get beaten. The man laughed at his temper, but Lee snapped back, telling him to stop spouting nonsense. The man pointed his sword, saying they'd talk after Lee took a few hits. Suddenly, Lee's eyes snapped open. He had been dreaming. He picked up his phone, seeing a notification for 8:25 showing he had something scheduled for today at 3 p.m., the White Tiger Clan interview. A month had passed, and the clan's recruiters would notice. Lee thought, why did I have to dream this? It was time to truly start taking action. At the White Tiger Clan interview, the waiting hall was packed with recruits. One of them, a bodybuilder, was casually lifting weights as the bald man at the entrance instructed everyone to place their hands on the magic power measurement device. When Lee stepped forward, the device erupted in a burst of energy, the readings spiking off the charts until the machine broke. The man quickly ordered a higher-ranked device. Eyes followed Lee as he moved, including a blue-haired onlooker. The bald man called him by name, number 1031, Lee Chung-shan SS, and asked him to try again. A girl in the crowd suddenly recognized him, shouting that he was a tyrant. Lee internally noted he had worn a hoodie, anticipating this reaction. Murmurs spread. People recalled he'd become an alcoholic, forced to retire after his team disbanded, ended up pale and withdrawn, living alone with games. Others questioned why he had come back now. When the device registered level 25 magic power SSS++, shock rippled through everyone. Someone exclaimed, "Wow, 25, others admitted they couldn't handle him in their lane. Meanwhile, inside the office, Seo sat on the sofa reading reports. The High-Off scandal, hushed until now, was finally surfacing. Prosecutors with the Association Corporation had seized headquarters, investigating 21 human sacrifices over the past 7 years. Cha Yayun, the Witch of Steel, announced strict legal action, and the White Tiger clan had launched an all-out war. Seo reflected that the High-Off matter had been cleaned up neatly, with some expressing gratitude to the mysterious hero Haho En Mask, though clues about the mask's identity remained undiscovered. Seo realized immediately that this was the man who had stolen Peter's key and resolved to find him. Suddenly, a man burst through a door shouting that a super rookie had appeared. Seo asked why the commotion, and the man explained that both Executive Director Oh and Director Kim were coming, then clarified it was Lee Chang, the same rookie from a month ago with the Black Shamshir and the Witch of Steel. Seo recalled wanting to scout him out, but High-Off Chaos had prevented it, and now Lee seemed to be applying for their test. A smile crept onto Seo's face as he asked about the results. The man confirmed Lee had topped everything, with a magic power rank of SSS++. Seo stood immediately, determined to secure him before anyone else. Meanwhile, at the C Division examination site, crowds gathered in the arena as Lee received messages about his incredible resurgence, his face plastered across the news. Articles called him the rising star, first SSS in Korea in 15 years, confirming he was indeed the tyrant Lee. Observers whispered in awe, some frustrated at the talent he possessed and the pressure it created for them. A screen notified Lee that the divine being who hunts had grown proud, claiming him as a talent of interest. He noticed 2 hooded men in the crowd, and the screen warned that the trapped tiger observed his hardships closely, while the snake that wanders the world suspected someone had a plan for him. Lee smirked, recognizing the intensity and knowing he was being watched closely. The bald man announced the start of the test. Monster hunting, from red orcs to twin-headed orcs. Any monster Lee wished to face could be summoned. Lee asked if those were all the monsters they had. The man replied that their strongest was the drake, and Lee calmly requested it. Gasps spread through the crowd as a massive black lizard with a horn materialized in the center of the arena, an imposing and terrifying sight. A screen appeared, noting that the divine being, the tiger trapped in hardship, wished to evaluate his skill. Whispers ran through the spectators, some alarmed at the sheer danger. The screen added that the tiger observed him with suspicion, judging him likely to die. Though Lee's face showed no fear, inside he remembered being chained from head to toe in his past life, the void pressing from behind, a smirk at him. In the present, he thought, I will have to meet your expectations. And the beast lunged toward him, sprinting across the arena. The creature screeched as it lunged at Lee, who casually lifted a long cylindrical object and hurled it into the air. The scene shifted to the past, showing the blacksmith who had crafted it. Lee greeted him, noting how tired he looked, but the blacksmith deflected any talk of the cause. Lee asked for the item, and the blacksmith handed over the cylinder, warning that its quality would reveal itself when examined. As Lee opened it, components poured out, and he began assembling the nameless artifact. Notifications floated before him. His spear technique was exceptional. He had mastered burst, lacquerate, thrush, and strike, and the divine being praised his skill. The blacksmith watched in awe, amazed at how a blind person could craft such a weapon. Returning to the present, Lee threw the cylinder toward the towering monster. It split open midair, and a sharp piece pierced the creature's eye. Gasps filled the arena, but 2 hooded men, radiating immense aura, remained focused on Lee and the unfolding scene. He commented that Lee's agility was beyond what his level should allow, and another added that team leader Park had noted his precision too. He could handle a bow just as well. Determined, the man watched Lee on the ground wielding his new weapon, a bangle whip that shimmered with blue energy. The screen reminded that the artifact belonged to him and its effect might vanish if given away, urging Lee to name it. Park, seeing the weapon, marveled. It was more than a spear. Everyone gasped as Lee drove his spear into the dragon, wrapping the whip around it and yanking back, slicing deeper. With a leap, he struck the creature's core, making it roar and spew blood, while narrowly dodging a tail strike. The crowd whispered in disbelief, "No way." The crowd was stunned, whispering that a level 25 moving this fast with all gold critical effects couldn't be human. He was a monster. A notification showed Lee's skill blood poison activating. Green fumes spread, paralytic poison coursed through the drake and it bled uncontrollably, dying. Lee stood, calm, then dashed for a final strike, driving his spear through the beast and ripping it into pieces. The screen confirmed the drake's disposal and Lee's level up along with his low-grade spear technique. A divine being praised his growing hunting skills and granted a +5 strength boost. The two hooded figures' auras combined into a lion shape, and the screen noted the tiger trapped in hardship was impressed, agreeing strongly with Lee's fight. Park smirked, insisting he had to bring Lee to him, but a sudden surge of yellow power erupted down the street, revolving across the arena. Seo appeared, sword in hand, acknowledging Lee's skill and his own tigrine powers while Lee scowled at the foul stench filling the air. Lee watched silently, thinking about how to respond. He liked the idea of taking control, of showing what a real tiger could do, but any counterattack now would only draw more attention. He considered moving out of Dark Red Mountain, feeling that might be enough for now. Suddenly, Park descended from above, radiating a red aura. The SEO shouted, asking what he thought he was doing, but Park only gritted his teeth, noting that his rude attitude toward his seniors hadn't changed. A tense back and forth erupted between SEO and Park, SEO claiming he had long ignored such slights, Park bragging about it, SEO insisting he was only taking what belonged to him, and Park retorting that no one should decide who Lee truly belonged to. Observers began murmuring, shocked that the Rider team leaders were fighting over a recruit. Team 3's Reek and Gang Sang-woo and Team 4's Yo Hunjin all watched, some smirking, anticipating the bloodshed that seemed about to unfold between the SEO, Park, Sang-woo, and Yo Hunjin. Lee watched the four leaders clash, each screaming over who would take him in, their anger radiating like fire. One shouted he'd take the rookie, another called nonsense and challenged him, and the quarrel bounced back and forth. Lee's thoughts darkened. These men, blessed by Hwaju, were obstacles he might have to eliminate. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the chaos, and an immense surge of energy slammed into the room. The four leaders vomited blood, struck by a force far beyond their power. Blood ran from their eyes, mouths, and noses as the old man appeared, the executive director O of the White Tiger Clan, O Siwan. Lee's heart skipped. This was the second in command, a man whose presence alone radiated authority. The screen flickered, praising his hunting instinct while he gaped at the sheer power. Siwan's voice carried calm yet lethal authority, chastising the leaders for squabbling over one person, declaring he would personally take responsibility for the uproar Lee caused. The four leaders froze, realizing neither would claim Lee. In his office, O Siwan surveyed the scene, noting the blood and telling them to change clothes. His gaze lingered on Lee, admiring the body honed through countless battles built for combat without unnecessary flair. He murmured, impressed, asking what Lee sought. Lee replied that money meant nothing. He desired a position in the Future Strategies Department, aware Siwan directly oversaw it and its ties to authority. The executive director O's laughter shook the room, yellow energy radiating from him, making Lee dizzy. He lectured on the ambition required to be a white tiger, emphasizing that the Future Strategies Department was the clan's backbone, and asked how Lee would prove himself. Lee, calm yet determined, prepared for the next step, the Blackish Red Mountain Range challenge. Lee pressed on, saying he knew all newcomers went through the Blackish Red Mountain Range and asked if setting a new record there would suffice. Sihuan paused, clarifying it wasn't just about being top in training but also in dungeon ranking. Lee confirmed he understood and the executive director O hesitated, hinting at some hidden expectation. Sensing it, Lee vowed to meet it as well, which impressed Sihuan, who nodded approvingly, admitting the range was ancient and that they'd been considering other training grounds. Lee smirked, realizing he might exploit the Blackish Red Mountain Range to find a weakness in the director, and audibly remarked he would close the doors himself. Siwan quietly acknowledged the prospect of speaking freely with him, and Lee smiled, requesting access to the White Tiger's library before venturing to the mountains. The director, impressed by his thirst for knowledge, granted it, noting it was the finest library in the world. Meanwhile, online searches for Li Changxian surged, with titles like Resurrected Tyrant spreading. Comments varied, some negative, some praising him, while Miss Plum shared how he had saved her, and Lieutenant Park gave a thumbs up. Back in the executive director O's office, Seo wept and yelled, demanding Li be handed over, lamenting that if Li were his mentee, his path would be effortless. Siwan corrected him, saying the clan's way was more like a gravel path and warned Seo to mind his manners or risk losing his team leader position. Seo groaned at repeated refusals, and the director explained that Li had volunteered for the Future Strategies Department and would resign if denied, making it impossible to place him in a lesser team. Once his training concluded, he would be assigned missions at the director's discretion and paired with the most suitable allies. Seo realized the plan and protested, but Siwan dismissed him, telling him to leave. Seo murmured affectionately, lamenting that he hadn't seen Li recently, and the director revealed with a knowing smirk that he had been locked away in the place Seo hated most in the world. A few days later, Li's presence sparked excitement everywhere, with comments noting that while Tiger's Hope's training camp had begun, the tyrant was forging a new legend for himself. Questions circulated about how far his SSS+++ rank dignity could reach. Li arrived at the dungeon blackish-red mountain range, standing atop a cliff and staring at the massive mountain before him. He thought he had to cleanse the entire mountain, drawing a deep breath as a faint purple glow rose from the peak. The glow intensified, revealing a massive creature, part bird, part dragon, hidden among the clouds. Meanwhile, someone crouched in the bushes, watching Li intently. From the tip of the mountain, a massive burst of purple light erupted, thickening the clouds and whipping the wind into a frenzy. Li spotted something soaring in the sky above, declaring it his goal. A message appeared, explaining that the blackish-red mountain range had long been deformed by the navigational influence of an unknown magical entity and instructing him to find and eliminate the culprit to restore the ecosystem. The range was divided into 8 areas, each housing unique heteromorphic organisms not found in typical dungeons, and all participants would receive an inventory and skill window to assist. Li noted how vast and ominous the blackish-red landscape truly was, reminiscent of some place in Arcadia. As he ventured deeper, he sensed someone following him and tilted his head toward the trees, only to see a faint figure trailing him. The message confirmed it. A faint wind still followed. Li realized these observers had been watching him since the library, and he muttered in thought, wondering what the executive director O was planning. A few days ago at the Tiger Library, the sheer size of the place struck us just as Thanatos had said. Li recalled Huju, noting how he had caused chaos even in heaven. Their conversation drifted back to that topic. Li confirmed Thanatos' remark, and he asked what tendencies devotees blessed by Huju might show. Li explained they would likely make enemies in many places. Thanatos pressed, asking if that was all, and Li clarified that they would extort, exploit, and parade their conquests as trophies, claiming it brought honor to their patron god. Thanatos noted that the Tiger Library itself was one such site and offered to provide a list of useful items. Li declined, preferring to choose on their own. Thanatos smirked, hinting that there were certainly things Li would like there. Li agreed to hear him out, and Thanatos named the Zodiac Sagittarius movement technique. Li mused, recognizing Sagittarius as Rockvert, with 6 martial techniques that seemed to let one move as if becoming light itself, attuned to divine power. Thanatos listed them: snow running, flight, reed stepper, launch, grass runner. Li questioned how Huju could possess one without a war breaking out, implying Sagittarius was unaware, and asked where Thanatos had learned this. Thanatos simply said he wondered, and Li guessed it was the fallen star. Now standing on the library's upper floor, Li focused on what he needed: Adventist, the divine ability that had allowed Sagittarius to become a zodiac. Before ascending to a star, Sagittarius had been an ancient, distant entity named Deus Ex Machina, and he had acquired this power by stealing part of his regained treasure. It let him seize a space instantly and project his divinity there, effectively becoming an absolute being. Li reasoned that if a divine being of the zodiac wanted to remain near Sagittarius, obtaining this ability would ensure that once he awakened his own divinity after transcending, no one could stop him. His thoughts were cut off by a message: the tiger trapped in hardship is observing your every move. Li moved toward the bookshelves, and a man appeared from behind, warning he could only use the collection for a week. The library was open 24 hours, and aside from the first and second grade sections he could access everything else, but none of the books could leave. The man mentioned that his girlfriend had requested Li's autograph, and though he noted how handsome Li was, Li ignored him, keeping his gaze forward, thinking that to avoid the senior director and Huju, he needed to stay extra cautious. The scene shifts back to Thanatos' earlier words. After witnessing Huju's exhibition hall in the One-Horned Tribe's martial library, Lee would naturally try to imitate it, and observing alone had its own enjoyment. Now, with an imperturbable mind activated and a peace of mind applied, Lee sank into the side of a desk and began reading a book. Day and night he remained in the library. The man watching him clenched his teeth, muttering how many days it had been and questioning whether Lee was really reading. Every visit, Lee was absorbed in a book, picking them without any clear criteria, some on spearmanship, others on swordsmanship, divine law, or even simple breathing techniques or proper defecation methods, briefly skimming the rest before returning them. The old man had instructed him to report anything suspicious, and he wondered what on earth he could relay. Observing for days, he concluded that Lee's seclusion was a front, meant to appear as though he were just another diligent outsider, but true talent never ignores personal study, and this was a perfect display. Frustrated, the man groaned for him to go home, feeling the situation was depressing. Meanwhile, a screen appeared before Lee, confirming his state. Concentration locked in, reading solely focused, comprehension and memorization heightened, ability to interpret difficult passages improved, but now the state of madness warned him of information overload, a headache forming and exceeding his capacity, recommending a rest, but Lee's focus remained unbroken. The screen announced the achievement obtained: Book Reading Maniac. It addressed him as Divine Being, noting the good season to hunt and teasing that he seemed to tire of endless reading. Snake, observing, was curious about the knowledge he had amassed. Pieces of understanding about the tiger trapped in hardship were granted, and Lee smirked at the notion. Obtaining the Advent steps wasn't his only goal, he was after the karma that shaped that bastard Huju, essentially his skill tree from the start. The Tiger Library, created by the White Tiger clan, displayed Huju's greatness while serving as a sanctuary for his teachings. Among the countless books, many hidden tomes contained the blueprint of Huju's constitution. Lee resolved to acquire these hidden volumes, piece them together to understand Huju as in the legendary painting, and ultimately identify the weaknesses of Huju's disciples and his martial technique of destruction. The screen confirmed that using his acquired knowledge, a new type of skill was being constructed and a skill combination was in process. As the combination progressed, Lee realized it was time to leave. The third grade library had reached the limit of information it could provide on the technique of destruction. To complete his mastery, he would need to open the first and second grade libraries and fill in the remaining gaps with the skills gained from his achievement, but those weren't yet accessible. Lee walked down the library corridor, muttering to himself that he had scoured this place 3 times already, yet the Advent steps were nowhere in sight. As expected, they must be in the first and second grade libraries. With roughly 3 hours left, he wondered if he should take one final sweep. If he found a word or phrase he couldn't understand, that meant a high chance it was in the 7th grade library. As he focused, the Divine Being Owl observed, impressed, his immobility reaching its limit, peace of mind stabilizing, wavering concentration solidifying, and his willpower strengthened by 1 level. Closing his eyes, Lee swiped his hand across every book on the shelves until he froze at 1. Opening his eyes, he exclaimed that he had found it, revealing a book titled 100 Dishes You Can Make with Monster Meat. He wasn't certain it was the Advent step but sensed something remarkable was hidden inside. Opening it and flipping the pages in a specific pattern, he paused, realizing no, this wasn't the Advent step. The scene then shifted to a dark, eerie voice echoing in the shadows declaring that this place harbored a deep grudge. A figure appeared, pierced with nails and sitting amidst scattered rose petals chained heavily, exuding a sense of malevolence and suffering. The voice continued, sharp and bitter, asking if Lee knew the feeling of being betrayed by someone you treated as a brother, as if of your own blood. He realized it was the child Moonsung who had caused this pain. Lee's thoughts raced. Moonsung? Then it hit him. Gum Chunho, the man who founded the White Tiger clan with the director and executive director O, recognized as one of the top 9 black tigers in the world, and Heojin's apostle. The book's speaker sounded as if he had been a close brother to such a figure. Could Gum Chunho be connected to this entity? Chunho, one of the few mercenaries whose name spread throughout the player world, had endured countless hardships and martial arts training before Heojin, keeping watch, took him in as an apostle. Yet this book suggested otherwise. The entity declared its name, Heojin, and claimed to be Moonsung's mentor. He had trained in swordsmanship for years, preparing to succeed the Ilman clan. But one day, their master brought in an apostle far younger than him. Treating him as a close brother, Heojin had held the sword with him, training him like a student. He never realized the thoughts brewing within the normally quiet apostle, nor the intentions of their guardian spirit, the tiger trapped in hardship. As the name Hyojin might suggest, this tiger was a chaotic god, thriving on evil, the source of battle, chaos, and fear. From such a perspective, it despised their pursuit of peace and the disciplined training they so carefully followed. Lee's mind raced as he read, realizing the stakes were far higher than he had imagined. Of course, Hyojin could have chosen a different apostle, but the Ilman clan had been the one handling Hyojin's doctrine most effectively. That meant he couldn't simply pick another, and so he buried his teeth and moved carefully. Hyojin's power had been internationally sealed, and Lee remembered hearing about that brief moment when it dwindled. Why hadn't this war-obsessed being appeared for nearly a century? It had to do with the Ilman clan, which Gum Chunho belonged to. The greater Hyojin's faith grew, the more chaos and calamity followed, but Hanyu likely opposed excessive bloodshed, preventing disaster. Perhaps that's why Hyojin chose Gum Chunho over Hanyu. Behind a wooden pillar, a man watched Lee pretending to read the book backward, clearly trying to look smart, but absurdly so. The book detailed Moonsung's ambush, planned long ago. Because the writer had been physically unable to wield a sword, he had been poisoned slowly in places he hadn't expected. In the end, maybe as a final respect, Moonsung didn't kill him, instead severing veins in his lungs, blocking his magic brazier and trapping him in an underground Ilman cave. His divine spirit could no longer protect him. From then on, Gum Chunho became the new priest, and all he could do was watch his clan rise over Ilman lands, helpless as chaos unfolded for a decade. Lee blinked as the text mentioned a voice. A voice? What was that? Flipping through blank pages, he suspected more was hidden. Then the screen announced a hidden piece had been found. An unknown will had become a seed in his body, boosting one of his skill completion rates drastically. Void Monarch counter jumped by 12%. Just for finding and analyzing a hidden piece? The screen confirmed more pieces remained to be found and combined. Lee realized this was no ordinary setup. A godly hand must be involved, likely the same voice Han Yu had mentioned. With 2 hours left, he calculated that the remaining pieces were probably in the 7th grade section, hidden cryptically to prevent Gum Chunho's followers from discovering them, yet designed so that finding the first piece would guide him to the rest. As he began searching, he noticed men around him crying, perhaps impressed by his dedication. The screen confirmed the tiger trusted him to become its royal priest and did not question his actions, while the divine snake regarded him with a knowing glance. Finally, Lee located another hidden piece, inching closer to uncovering the full truth. A heavy silence follows as the truth of the hidden piece sinks into Lee, the words echoing in his mind: betrayal, confinement, the priest, the demon, the tiger. The will reveals that the Void Monarch's origin lies in devouring its own kin, a monstrous act that birthed chaos and despair. The unknown writer had once been deceived by the priest he trusted most, stripped of power and forced into solitude, only to regain strength through the teachings of another betrayed soul. That person taught him the forbidden method to slay the divine tiger shackled in hardship, and with this knowledge he rebuilt his body, his will hardened by rage and grief. Yet even as he swore vengeance, he wrestled with doubt. Could he really strike down the one he had nurtured like his own child? Torn between duty and attachment, he left behind this final testament, entrusting his grudge to a worthy heir who would carry the burden. As Lee finishes reading, the system message flashes across his vision: you have succeeded in finding all the hidden pieces. An overwhelming surge of willpower ignites within him, the unfulfilled fury of a nameless warrior fusing with his own spirit. Achievement unlocked. He who succeeds the grudge of the furious tiger. His stats soar, intelligence increased, will strengthened, and a new skill is inscribed into his being: Black Mountain Monarch First Claw. The description unfurls with chilling detail. Nothing on earth rivals the terror of a beast wielding all its claws. Level 1, active counter-type with devastating effects, excessive bleeding far deadlier than normal wounds, chaining attacks that stack shock upon shock, forcing the enemy into relentless suffering. The realization hits him. This is no mere skill but a weapon forged from centuries of hatred, one that can tear through even the mightiest in an instant. Lee grips his hand tight, feeling the weight of the clawed power now residing within him, aware that he has inherited not just strength, but a grudge spanning generations. The newly acquired skill unfolds further in Lee's mind: chain attacks with no cooldown, shock stacking that multiplies power as each strike builds upon the last, and compatibility that allows one skill to be hidden within another for devastating combinations. Black Mountain Monarch First Claw, an inheritance of the White Tiger clan, feels less like a counter and more like a primal technique rooted in divine ferocity. It bears the weight of an ancient god's memory, a hatred sharpened into power, but its drawback is clear. The drain of magical power is immense, so great that Lee realizes he must pour all his current proficiency just to summon one claw. He resolves to secure moralizers, acknowledging he needs their support before mastering it fully. Advent steps will have to wait, priorities must shift. After a week in the library, he finally steps out, his path leading him to the dungeon Blankish Red Mountain Range. The information gathered warned of terrible difficulty, yet the director himself had urged Lee toward it. Suspicion stirs. What secret lies within this place that warrants such insistence? As he walks deeper, someone trails behind him, hidden among the trees. Lee notices, concluding he must remove that stalker first when the chance comes. The pursuer, however, only wishes to be ignored, silently hoping Lee continues training without acknowledging him. But Lee knows he cannot yet face Song Yujeon with his current skill set, so patience will dictate his strike. Entering a safe zone, he finds other players gathered, murmurs quickly spreading. Some whisper if he is truly Lee Changxian, others speculate on the outcome, while a few disdain comparisons. Excited girls call out to him as fans, but Lee keeps his gaze ahead, locking onto a tall man with long hair and a face mostly covered by bandages, leaving only sharp eyes exposed. Reading the identity card, he sees the name Baek Gyo-wul, and suspicion flickers. This man must bear the blessing of another god. Just as tension thickens, a voice echoes from atop a tall stone, commanding everyone's attention. The White Tiger 26th trainee training is about to begin. Lee smirks faintly, realizing the situation has become more troublesome than he anticipated. At the office, Wu sat at his desk when a call from his niece came through, her voice sharp as she asked if he was even listening. He assured her he was, guessing she wanted a photocard from YDS, the company's car commercial models, promising he could get her assigned one through his connections. She yelled through the earpiece, accusing him of not listening at all and declaring she hated him before hanging up. Wu rubbed his forehead in frustration, muttering about being depressed and blaming the Jamsil gate. He admitted to himself he was a fool who always catered to her wishes, remembering how difficult yet heartwarming it was to watch her grow up. Fear washed over him as he recalled the day she was trapped in the Jamsil gate. Desperate to dispatch a rescue team, he had struggled with the tension breaking, left with no option but to pray. In the church, he had begged the nameless patron giant to protect her, his pleas filled with desperation. When a subordinate arrived to report that Hyabin had returned safely, Wu broke down, overwhelmed with tears of relief. Now, in the present, sitting across from his niece, he told her he still wished to thank the one who saved her and asked for a name. She revealed it was Cheong Seon, who had concealed himself after the dungeon mission, likely to avoid exposure. She wondered if waiting for him to reveal himself was wiser. Wu decided instead that he would personally scout Lee Chongxian, offering him a place within their clan and his gratitude. Hearing this, she beamed with joy, calling her uncle the best, and he chuckled warmly, teasing her for being so easily delighted. Wu replayed the talk with his niece in his mind, sighing as he admitted to himself that he could not even face Lee properly after how their first encounter went. The memory surfaced of their clash, blades crossing as both blocked each other's strikes with equal force. Staring at his phone now, he muttered that he had probably angered him back then. The business card he had given was meant as an invitation, a chance to personally scout him for 5-star sword, and he had been certain Lee would reach out at least once. That assumption turned out to be a grave mistake. Instead, Lee had gone directly to White Tiger's employment branch, cutting off all contact with 5-star for an entire month. Wu cursed under his breath, realizing how foolish it was to overlook someone like him. With an SS+++ grade, Lee was beyond the limits of classification, a true genius whose strength could not be measured by conventional ranks. Wu clenched his jaw, remembering how obvious it should have been from the start. No wonder he had been that strong. Since then, Hyabin had hounded him daily, screaming that she hated him and blaming his lack of effort for Lee's decision to join the other side. Even his older brother, sister-in-law, and their father, the president of the group, had given him sharp looks of disapproval. He admitted inwardly that he had been careless, but with so many matters demanding his attention, what else could he have done at the time? He had assumed Lee was still keeping himself hidden. Now that the man had revealed himself as a monster among hunters, Wu buried his face in his hands, thinking how he could possibly recruit someone who had already become a beast. At the blackish red mountain range dungeon, the crowd buzzed with excitement, girls squealing that Lee had glanced their way, some dramatically claiming they could die happy now, while a man teased one of them for drooling, only to earn her furious glare. Yet he knew her devotion was unstoppable, her passion so intense she even dreamed of joining the same path as Lee. He reflected bitterly that only those with outrageous results had passed, not even someone like Kim Jong-un overleader had made it. Then his attention shifted when he noticed a tall man standing nearby, completely spaced out yet radiating an intimidating aura. He asked what was wrong, but the man dismissed it, saying nothing, before pointing out that the rules of the training camp were about to be explained. Soon, a bald instructor with an imposing presence appeared and announced that the rules, already shared in advance, would be repeated. A screen lit up with details. The training would last 100 days, with the first month devoted to learning 3 core skills of White Tiger alongside hands-on drills, while the remaining 70 days would strip away the safety zone, forcing them to survive only with what they had learned. Survival had no fixed method. They could form teams or act alone. Points would be awarded for achievements, varying with the monster's rank, while instructors and guards would remain hidden in the dungeon, monitoring and scoring them constantly. Intervention was forbidden unless lives were at risk, though doing so would cause point deductions. Falling below 0 meant immediate failure and disqualification from the company, but the highest scorers would receive compensation at the end, and the top 5 would even earn a patron's blessing. The instructor further explained that as long as it wasn't a crime, autonomous judgment and actions were permitted. Then he opened a box, revealing 3 scrolls, the foundational techniques of White Tiger, Tiger's Aura, Tiger's Steps, and Tiger's Calamity. Watching them, one man felt his chest tighten with excitement, thinking he was truly about to become a member of White Tiger. Unfurling the first scroll, he read that Tiger's Aura, known as Misfortune, could project magical power outward as an attack, producing an overwhelming effect. The second scroll, Tiger's Steps, taught the ability to carry vigor through empty stepping. The last, Tiger's Calamity, amplified destructive force, mimicking a tiger's savage strikes that tore its prey apart. At the instructor's command, everyone ripped their scrolls, golden light flowing into their bodies as notifications confirmed they had acquired the 3 skills, filling the crowd with joy and disbelief that they now carried the White Tiger's power. The instructor prepared to demonstrate when Les suddenly raised his hand, prompting him to pause and ask what he wanted, and Lei calmly replied that he had already mastered all of them. Shock spread through the group, whispers breaking out that it was impossible for anyone to fully grasp stance, aura, and movement just from tearing a scroll. Some accused him of receiving the scrolls early, others dismissed it as arrogance, but one girl cried out in admiration, claiming his confidence proved the tyrant still lived. Bia looked uneasy, while another man smirked inwardly, convinced Lei would soon humiliate himself since his father, an executive in White Tiger, had assured him the 3 skills never entered Le's hands. The instructor invited him to demonstrate, and many waited eagerly for his failure, yet what followed left them breathless. Lee triggered Tiger's Steps, his body shimmering with a yellow-red glow as he moved with an ethereal flow. Gasps erupted when he unleashed Tiger's Aura, the energy not only bursting forth but shaping into a roaring spectral tiger around him. His eyes shone fiercely as murmurs of disbelief filled the air, and the man who mocked him clenched his jaw, unable to comprehend how he achieved the impossible. Then Lee invoked Tiger's Calamity, his power surging to its peak, leaving the crowd shouting in awe and fear at the overwhelming force before them. The glow intensifies, reshaping the entire atmosphere as radiant streaks twist into the form of a roaring tiger that shakes the ground, leaving everyone stunned in silence. Bia watches without a word, both shaken and impressed, while Lee lifts his dagger, sending a sweeping arc of light crashing outward. Even the instructor, standing closest, is struck by the force spilling from him, his eyes widening as the once stable ground splinters, molten lava seeping through the cracks and incinerating beasts that wander too near the safe zone. The scene transforms into a burning wasteland, and the instructor mutters in disbelief, unable to understand how such power could be unleashed by a simple trial. Lee answers casually that he only tried it out, leaving the crowd speechless, torn between awe and frustration. Then a man steps forward from behind, the same one who had been tailing him in silence, his thoughts racing as he realizes this was why Lee spent so much time doing nothing in the library. Overwhelmed, he admits inwardly that the youth had mastered in moments what had taken him 10 years to grasp, finally understanding why the manager had tasked him with watching so closely. Speaking out loud, he declares that Le had not been idle but had been refining his skill in ways others couldn't see, and with sincerity, he bows deeply, apologizing for misjudging him and confessing his respect. Lee meets the man's bow with silence, Yet murmurs ripple among the players as one exclaims that not only is he a genius, but also relentless in his effort, while another wonders aloud if such strength means they might one day overcome the tyrant. A married woman grows hysterical, declaring she's satisfied with having such a handsome oppa, prompting her brother to mutter that she's delusional. Suddenly the screen glows, declaring that the divine being Tiger watches with satisfaction at his profound grasp of the doctrine, promising a higher rank if he continues to impress. Lee muses that the entity seems thrilled, but the screen shifts again, revealing Good Season's displeasure. He smirks, realizing the Void Monarch constantly seeks to gift him challenges while another deity seethes with dissatisfaction. Turning to the instructor, he remarks that he has proven his skill, earning a curt nod and dismissal. Without hesitation, Lee advances, leaving the safe zone behind as the others watch with envy and irritation. The mountains ahead loom dark and ominous, their crimson haze weighing down the air. Another message appears declaring both Tiger and Good Tiger eager to see whether he can fulfill his bold claim of clearing the dungeon, proving they had been observing even his private talk with the manager. Each breath grows heavier as he steps forward, the suffocating air thick with the remnants of unknown magic, an environment harsh enough to crush normal players. Then the screen reappears, announcing that with the trigram for divinations, the flame immobility begins to activate, purifying the very air around him. The inner piece settles in place and Lee draws out his weapons, merging them into a long spear with one end curved like a blade. A screen flashes stating that divine being Snake watches eagerly to see what trick he will unveil. Standing at the mountain's center, he murmurs that his target lies ahead, and another screen declares Tiger steps are activating. As he triggers the skill, the ground quakes and a new transcription pathway is added. His spear blazes with yellow energy, the glow flowing along its edge as he swings and thrusts, unleashing a strike that shreds a beast into countless pieces. Nodding to himself, he confirms his suspicion about the place, only to see a horde of beasts scatter in fear, unwilling to approach him. He concludes this must be the habitat of the one-legged ghost he seeks. Suddenly his aura shifts, the golden radiance deepening into a dark purple mana, his eyes gleaming like neon flames. Spinning his spear in a full arc, he mutters that he must test this power first. A new screen appears, announcing the activation of Black Mountain Monarch's first claw. Two jagged claw-like marks etch themselves across his face, and he realizes he has awakened the Monarch's claw. Lee admits he isn't fully accustomed yet but notes the magic drain is overwhelming. Taking a steady breath, he resolves to raise his mana capacity no matter what. Convinced this is indeed the one-legged ghost's domain, he suddenly senses another ghost swooping from above. With a mere flick of his finger, he slices it apart, its single serpent-like eye glaring before vanishing. Without relying on his spear, he continues cutting down foes using only his fingers. A screen flashes stating that divine being Good Season admires his skill, while Snake marvels at how he has mastered the research data granted as a bonus, successfully wiping out the ghost village. As rewards, he receives the ghost's knee joints and a massive one-legged club. Soul exhaustion activates, pulling the spirits of the fallen into him, yet his attention catches on a lone flower pushing through the crimson leaves. It almost feels as if it's staring at him, and he smirks, whispering that he's found it. Stepping closer, he plucks it, only to find tiny eyes embedded within its petals and a colossal root system stretching endlessly beneath the soil, resisting as he pulls. Lee realizes the screen confirms he has acquired a screeching flower, and the plant itself lets out shrill cries, lashing at him with its small leaves. Another message explains it is a flower born in the gap between life and death, prone to random shrieks and laced with a deadly toxin that could sicken anyone who carelessly consumes it. The scene shifts to the past, where Lee once stood before a gathering of mysterious figures. Among them, a hooded man in a red cloak scoffed at his request, calling him insane for seeking the 8 trigram-earned sapphire. Lee calmly answered that he had heard the man knew the way and insisted his purpose wasn't merely for regeneration. The man, Ero, laughed, admitting he had heard rumors of Lee's madness and now saw them confirmed. He mocked the idea of twisting Dao De Tianzun's urn, meant for birth and creation, into a source of chaos and ruin, while also chasing after the blood-red lightning aura. Yet, with a smirk, he said such recklessness suited him, so he would naturally lend a hand. Lee pressed if he would teach, and Iroh replied there was no reason not to share his craft. When Lee demanded the method, Iroh explained it was deceptively simple. Expand your flames, but instead of adding fuel, add more fire. Without restraint, the fire would consume its wielder instantly. That is why, he warned, one must subdue it with something cruel and merciless to keep it under control. Iro once told him to set his flames and seek out the monsters Yuk and Jigu, for only then could he claim the world-ending fire. Now clutching the screeching flower in the present, Lee's gaze shifts to the sky where a winged creature hovers above the mountain, and he believes it to be Jigu. He thinks to himself that instead of Odin's fire from the 8 trigrams, he must transform it into a raging blaze, and with the flower grown in the one-legged ghost village as his fuel, he swallows it whole. A screen flashes, declaring he has ingested the screeching flower, its deathly poison spreading, but his poison immunity activates, granting increased tolerance. The 8 trigrams Odin fire flares brighter, purifying him, while his magic rises by 0.3. Smirking, he notes he can now ignite fire to expand his capacity. Notifications flood in. He has cleared the one-legged ghost village, earned the one-legged ghost skill and heart, soloed a laughing flower, purged the red-bearded ghost village, uncovered a colony of fighting flowers, and wiped out a swarm of dark ghosts. An achievement appears: slaughter of the mountain and forest. A divine being yawns, asking how long he'll keep walking, while the owl spirit watches intently, fascinated by his reckless progress. With each step, Lee advances closer to the mountain, his eyes fixed on Jigu's nest perched high on a cliff. Standing before it, he whispers that so this is where it hides. His mind recalls his earlier talk with Iro when he had asked what kind of monster Jigu was. Iro explained it was neither spirit nor beast, too strange for either, and closer to a herb that embodied fire and death itself. When Lee asked if it had a core, Iro replied it carried no such thing, though something akin existed: its right eye. The grudges of countless spirits had fused under searing heat into a jewel-like orb, and with that, Lee could reshape the 8 trigram urn's fire. With this thought, he leaps down toward the empty nest, deciding to prepare a trap while Jigu is away. Elsewhere, an instructor studies the trainee list, noting that this time the 26 flag barrier wasn't their greatest, but motivation spurred by Lee's bold progress had pushed 40% of them past the trial within just 10 days. At the same time, 3 men trek the mountain path. One confirms the place is real, another points out that only the tyrant could leave such traces, and the last cuts the chatter, insisting they focus on how best to torment Li Changxian. The 3 chase after Li's trail, their voices sharp as they trade words. One mutters that Li isn't what he seems, insisting his inner self is far removed from his appearance, and if White Tiger's overseer learns this, it could cause problems. Another sneers, dismissing White Tiger's righteous image as a mask, calling its roots nothing more than greed and bloodshed hidden under the guise of justice. He adds that whatever White Tiger handed Lee must be invaluable, and even without it, his past as a pro gamer and likely wealthy background mean he has plenty worth taking. The third man speaks hesitantly, saying nothing will come from bothering someone just minding his own business, but his words halt the others in their tracks, their eyes burning with irritation. Nervous, he stammers, clarifying that causing pointless trouble could ruin their main plans, but argues that stealing White Tiger's prize for the new generation is their real chance to turn things around. The angriest of them snarls back, asking if he's truly worried they cannot handle a mere novice like Lee. One of the men growls, accusing the third of looking down on them and demanding if he wants to die or fight, forcing the frightened man to quickly agree. The other 2 grin, leaning close with mocking threats, warning that if he mouths off again, they'll tear his head off and toss it to a one-legged ghost. Left trembling, he eventually gathers his courage and runs after them. Night falls, and suddenly screeching echoes across the mountains as countless traps are sprung. The screen displays: the unmasked evil spirit has fallen into the trap, ruin of explosion and penetration activated, paralysis triggered, acidic poison inflicted, target defeated. A dual-headed python, a fire cannon and a tiger spirit bird are also caught in the traps, earning him another level up. Yet Lee frowns, realizing only fire-type creatures are appearing, while the one he seeks refuses to show itself. The screen notes a massacre in progress, and the divine being of good season laughs, delighted by the sight of the fiery blasts. Lee sighs, thinking it's already the 10th day and still no sign of the nest. He has advanced from level 29 to 32, and with the fire ghost gone, he leaps down, considering if he should follow the river again while reminding himself to manage his belongings carefully. Lee drops down only to find Beak waiting, their eyes locking as Beak raises his stealth and mutters in disbelief, unable to grasp what he sees. Lee demands to know why he came here and accuses him of following, then declares that since he witnessed everything, he will have to be killed. He lunges forward, but Beak swiftly closes the gap, parrying with his sword at close range. Forced back by another strike, Beak steadies himself while Lee studies him, noting the skill required to handle a spear over 3 meters long and estimating his level to be around 37 or 38. The exchange grows fiercer, Lee's attacks sharp and relentless, each aimed with deadly precision at Beak's neck, forcing him into desperate evasions. Feeling the danger, Beak thrusts his palm forward, black energy swirling as it blasts Lee back, though he narrowly twists aside and counters, slashing with his rusted weapon in an explosion that tears away the bandages covering Beak's face. Staggered, Beak wonders why he survived that blow, while Lee demands how he wields the secret art of shadow. Shocked, Beak presses him on how he knows that name. Memories resurface in Lee's mind, back in a life consumed by war and madness, when only a few comrades stayed at his side before abandoning him. The goddess of slaughter and destruction, the dragon who slumbered 1,000 years, the iron-blooded lion, and the wandering shadow Xerxes, all bound together by Xerxes' unique power, the secret art of shadow, a set of skills and strength that defined him alone. While others held multiple divine powers, Xerxes possessed only one authority, yet it made him unmatched. That hidden term was known only among his companions, leaving Lee unsettled about Beak's connection. The screen flickers with divine commentary, the tiger spirit questioning the origin of Beak's skill. Lee reflects on the difference between Xerxes' true art of shadow and what a human might claim to know, but Beak demands again how he learned of it. Lee shrugs him off, insisting he was the one who asked first. With a roar, Beak vows to drag the truth from him, his aura shifting as it turns pitch black. From the cliffside, Beak lunges with his spear, the air splitting with rage, yet Lee slips past the thrust with ease. Their clash grows closer, the screen announcing that the divine being Tiger is delighted to witness such a fierce battle between those destined to be his dependents. Beak roars for answers, while another message flashes, the divine being Good Season vowing she won't forgive him if he loses to a stranger. Lee locks his weapon into place, deciding he cannot kill until he uncovers the truth about the secret art of shadow. Their spears collide with a thunderous blast that shakes the ground, forcing Beak back as he realizes Lee wields a spear as well. Lee soars high and crashes down with a strike, but Beak catches it, straining against the sheer weight of his power. Sparks explode as they are blasted apart, yet Lee surges forward, chaining Tiger Calamity with Tiger Step and surrounding himself with Tiger Aura. His eyes blaze neon yellow, the air thick with searing heat, and from the merged energy rises a roaring lion, its spirit charging at Beak. Overwhelmed, Beak is struck down, hurled against a stone wall before collapsing and coughing blood. Lee closes in, blade poised at his opponent's forehead, only to withdraw it at the last instant. The screen appears, Good Season squealing in delight at the fight, while Tiger engraves Lee into his memory once again. Beak, shaken, demands to know what he is, but Lee responds with the truth. He is Ghostborn, one cursed with a monstrous body yet granted strange abilities, a child born from the union of ghost and human. Beak stammers in disbelief, but Lee brushes it aside, thinking how the scars on his face are not burns but marks of his origin, the so-called secret art of shadow, not a learned technique but an innate gift. The reverberations he felt must have belonged to Xerxes, though weaker now than before. He wonders what fate befell his old comrade and why he would abandon his son in the mortal realm. With no other choice, Lee resolves to keep Beak close, realizing there is no certainty that the boy knows anything about his father at all. Lee speaks firmly, telling him it is clear he has been trying to cure his ghost-born curse using the Jigui's eye, but such a thing will never work. Beak snaps back, demanding what he means and what he could possibly know, but Lee replies with calm certainty that he knows more than Beak himself. He explains that the truth revealed itself the moment their weapons clashed, that the scars on his face are not from inheriting traits of fire spirits as he suspects, and that Jigui's eyes cannot erase them. He clarifies that if fire spirits were truly his bloodline, he would never have been able to wield the darkness attribute of the shadow. Lee further tells him the Jigui is closer to death than to fire, its aura more ghostly than anything else, and that consuming its essence would only drive him toward becoming a specter or evil spirit. He concludes that Beak's desperate grasping at such hopes is proof he only sought escape from the curse that marks his life. Hearing this, Beak breaks down in tears, asking what he is supposed to do then. Lee answers simply that he will cure him. Beak looks up in disbelief, brow raised, before Lee continues, proposing they make a deal. Beak asks what kind of deal, and Lee confirms it. He wants his knowledge. He points out that Beak clearly studied the Jigui in depth, perhaps even more obsessively than anyone else, and asks not only for that information but for his cooperation as well. Inwardly, Lee notes that Beak must have poured his entire soul into that research, perhaps even surpassing his own understanding of the creature's nature. Beak mutters in doubt, asking how he is supposed to believe him, and Lee responds by asking if he wants proof right now that the treatment is possible. Beak's eyes widen at the claim, and when Lee calmly tells him to extend his hand, he does so without hesitation. Lee tells him that whether he believes or not makes no difference, then sits cross-legged on the ground and clasps Beak's hand, warning that the process will be hard to endure. Heat surges from Lee's palm, flames snaking into Beak's body, making him stiffen at the sudden burn. Lee instructs him firmly to keep his eyes shut and not to breathe in, warning that if he does, his magic power circulation will collapse. The fire spreads through Beak's frame, wrapping him in searing waves until the screen declares that his ghost-born condition is beginning to transform. Under the moonlight, Beak studies his hand in disbelief as the screen notes that Divine Being Good Season is astonished at the drastic change. Joy swells inside him, while Divine Being Snake muses that the 8 trigrams fire effect demands deeper research, and the tiger spirit lets out a half-laugh at the household's sudden optimism. Beak hears Lee admit that this is his limit for now, explaining that constant treatment will be necessary and even then a full recovery will be difficult. Beak asks what happens then, and Lee replies that if he helps him defeat the Jigu, they can gain more firepower and perhaps even achieve complete healing, offering a monopact if needed. Beak smirks and says trusting him will be enough, which makes Lee think he is far more useful than expected. Curious, Beak asks how he can help, only to hear Lee insist that he first speak to him more formally, feeling it doesn't sit right that his friend Jason addresses him so casually. The screen flashes as Divine Being Snake clicks its tongue and calls him a boomer. Shaking it off, Lee explains that to chase the Jigu, they first need to study its behavior, noting that it acts much like a crow and that searching its nesting grounds thoroughly will be the key to tracking it down. Their talk is cut short when they notice a pile of treasure before them: swords, bows, armor, and heaps of gold coins glittering under the light. Divine Being Snake remarks that the Jigu keeps corpses as keepsakes, while Divine Being Tiger explains it does not only collect shiny things but also treasures of high value, able to recognize them instantly and hoard them as trophies, though eventually it forgets them. By studying these items, they can predict its next move. Lee picks up a bow known as the White Dove Bow, its string smooth under his fingers, said to pierce any target with absolute precision and fire 5 arrows in succession. The screen describes it as a weapon forged from the wings, bones, and feathers of a mighty flying beast by an unknown hunter. He then examines the sword before deciding he will keep a few items for himself and sell the rest. Just as he turns, his gaze catches on an orb suspended in the air, radiating a deep, purple aura. The scent of death lingers around it, and the screen identifies it as an illusion pearl, formed from the death flower, destruction flower, and the grudges of countless victims of smallpox. Holding it, Lee reflects on how feared smallpox once was, rivaling even the terror of a tiger, and realizes it may be tied to the white tiger. Beak, wide-eyed, declares he knows where the Jigu has gone. Surprised, Lee asks how so fast, and Beak explains it was easier than expected since the creature had been busy feeding and seemed to have drained much of its strength. Lee deduces that it must have gone deeper into the mountains seeking mystical beings with powerful souls, and Beak agrees. Lee, impressed by how reliable he is, urges that they waste no more time, and together they set off toward their destination. 4 days later, as they rush through the mountains, Lee drifts into thoughts of his earlier talk with Iro, remembering the warning that hunger and greed would grow beyond anything he could imagine. Snapping back to the present, he and Beak finally reach the mountain's end where a screech echoes below. There, the Jigu feasts on another monster, its enormous form blotting out the light. The screen identifies it as a Class 4 disaster, causing drought wherever it roams. Divine Being Good Season marvels at its size, licking her lips at the thought of hunting a phoenix-like beast. Lee's Viper Eye activates, and with his bow raised, he locks onto vital points. The screen then reveals the Divine Being Tiger feels pride in his household, spreading his name, and grants him a new benefit. Lee clenches his teeth, shocked as his vision expands, the area glowing with yellow energy. He realizes all his senses have sharpened by a level, letting him track every movement as the phoenix swallows its prey. He wonders if this enhancement stems from the Void Monarch's blessing. The screen notes that Divine Being Good Season, unsettled by the Void Monarch's repeated gifts, grows frustrated and panics, tugging at her hair before deciding to grant her own authority. Lee acknowledges her desperate play as the power fuses with him, the bow in his hands now imbued with 100% accuracy, a bullseye guarantee that ensures no marked target will ever escape his aim. Lee steadies his bow, the arrow now crackling with blue electricity, and releases it toward the phoenix. Every shot lands true, striking the beast's vital points. The screen declares that, with lightning explosion and lightning net combined, he can temporarily wield lightning storm. The Jigu shrieks as bolts tear through its body, each impact bursting into violent arcs of destruction. Beak draws in a sharp breath, awestruck by the devastating display, while others marvel at how overwhelming the Void Monarch's blessing has become, granting Lee the combat sense he always lacked. The screen flashes again, noting Divine Being Good Season feels completely overshadowed, muttering that no one can rival such an authority, mocking the tiger's earlier gift as worthless. Yet in truth, the tiger's benefit takes hold, bestowing beast-like senses upon Lee, his eyes, ears, and every perception sharpened beyond human limits, while his sixth sense warns of hidden dangers nearby. In that moment, he no longer feels like a man with a bow, he has become a beast ready to fight. The Jigu screeches in rage, its body writhing as the lightning spreads across its wings. The screen declares that beast's senses have honed all of Lee's focus onto the creature, letting him anticipate its movements more clearly. Without hesitation, he dashes forward, Beak following close behind, but a sudden message halts him. An intruder without raid permission has appeared. Two bald men shoot forward and land in their path, arms crossed as they block the way. Their stern voices echo, warning that this is a secured zone, and only approved personnel are permitted. They order the trainee to fall back, refusing to let him pass. The screen flashes that Jigu has taken a critical hit from Lee's arrow, the lightning bursting even fiercer as both lightning explosion and lightning net rise in level. Jigu shrieks in agony, its cries shaking the sky. The guards repeat their warning, insisting this is a protected zone and demanding Lee and Beak leave at once. Beak shouts back that they've chased this monster for days and must be allowed to finish the hunt, but the bald men refuse, declaring only authorities may pass. They add that if the warning is ignored, force will be used and any accidents will not be their responsibility. Lee grits his teeth in frustration, while behind them Jigu roars, its body crackling with furious energy as it begins to take flight. Beak yells that if it escapes now they will lose their chance to bring it down, urging the guards to move. Yet the men stand firm, coldly telling them to turn back unless they want to be beaten down. Beak grows tense, but Lee keeps his composure, thinking of the executive director O's promise that he would not be obstructed. He suspects the guards were never informed, or perhaps deliberately ordered to block him. His mind turns to the hidden white tiger, the illusion pearl recovered from Jigu's nest, and the possibility that someone involved with this secret had been killed by the creature. Perhaps the director is trying to cover evidence, or others are after the pearl themselves. Deciding to press further, Lee asks aloud if moving freely outside the protected area is permitted. The men confirm it is, so Lee replies that in that case they should not be concerned. Jigu suddenly ascends into the air, filling the battlefield with suffocating pressure, and the guards cry out as the monster unleashes an attack straight into their midst, blasting them away. Extending his hand, Lee releases a surge of purple energy, clashing against Jigu's flaming breath. Sparks collide in midair, weaving into chaotic strands as the screen announces that the 8 trigram urnfire has discovered a new source of flame and is rapidly attempting to absorb it. Lee and Big's journey flashes back to the moment they were halted by the sight of a half-devoured creature, its body mangled as though torn apart. Lee studies it with sharp eyes, thinking this thing must have left behind a chick. Big questions him in surprise, and he replies that it makes sense. The sudden abandonment of the nest and the absorption of fire would only add up if it were sharing its essence with a child. He notes that if they use this fact well, it could become an advantage, since Jigu is no ordinary beast but a mystical spirit feared even by rankers who struggle to face it alone, requiring careful preparation. When Big asks if an idea has struck, Lee presses him, and Big admits he has a few preparations but cannot guarantee success. Lee reasons that if the bird had hatched a chick, it would surely seek nourishment, which makes its movements more predictable. He resolves to reach its intended destination first and set a trap, knowing its reliance on prey's soul scent is effective. Now the present returns, showing Lee standing before the Jigu, flames and dark energy raging as authority warns that its spirit is being consumed by exhaustion, while the flames of purgatory spread through it like a curse devouring every fragment of its soul. The giant bird is engulfed in hellfire, and even Beak and the 2 guards watching feel its scorching heat. Beak mutters that the beast is devouring everything within, recalling Lee's earlier words that its hunger is not born of thrill but compulsion, driven to feast without rest, making every soul it swallows fuel to sustain its cursed fire. Lee's earlier plan comes back, coating it with ice poison and paralysis poison to subdue it, and Beak realizes the Jigu is helpless against such toxins, exactly as Lee had said. Yet Li privately acknowledges a darker truth he has not revealed. Once the Jigu kills and absorbs a spirit, that spirit fuses into its flesh, further strengthening its monstrous body, which is why, after feeding, it always tries to flee. Li declares he will drag the beast down with soul exertion, knowing once the flames of purgatory ignite through spirit, they will race across the cluster of souls that make up the Jigu until no force can halt them. He explains the creature has no way to resist the 8 trigram urine fire, its natural nemesis, and that the ashes and flames born from its burning will be taken by him. The cursed fire absorbs Jigui's own, its destructive might feeding into its regenerative strength, yet Li senses the danger. What consumes the beast may also consume him. Notifications flood his vision one after another, strength increased, agility, magic power, all rising, uncontrollably. A warning flashes, uncontrolled growth can act as poison, discontinue use of authority, but he presses on. The 8 trigram urine fire shifts wildly, slipping from his control as his magic circuit strains and surpasses its limit, still forcing new engravings into him. At last the circuit halts, unable to channel his full power, and the system attempts a new transformation. A message declares an achievement unlocked, he who swallowed the sun, and announces the integration of a new magic circuit that accelerates soul extraction. The Jigui's soul begins to be torn free, though it thrashes to resist, while one of the guards panics demanding what they should do. Li, calm in the storm, decides it is time to unseal the final weapon. He thrusts forward his blade, its nature shifting as the screen proclaims the eternal flames now burn within the fish intestine sword, the fire inside awakened with a flow of blood. A divine or defective latent qualification is confirmed, and as he says this is what he has awaited, the sword cries out, its body gleaming as searing fire bursts forth from within. There is said to be only a single method to bring down a Jigu completely, and that is to unseal the full power of the fish intestine sword. To awaken it, 2 keys are required. A vast surge of world-ending flames consumed without restraint and blood to bind the release. Together they serve as the lock's answer, the means to free the blade that has held Lian sealed for 1,000 years. This sword, once forged by the first Oyezi, has since been handed through his line, kept ever near the brazier so that the imprints of each successor etched themselves into the steel, the marks of their lineage engraved into its very core. It is only natural for fire to take root within the fish intestine sword. Long before it reached Oyezi, the blade had passed through countless assassins, drinking deep of blood until it was feared as a demonic weapon, a sword of death. The stains within it could never be washed away, and now, at last, both fire and blood were awakened, fulfilling the hidden qualification of a divine artifact. After consuming Li's flame and blood, the sword became bound to him. He extended the blade, its edge dripping with blood and searing with fire, before shouting for it to cry out. A message appeared declaring the advance of the fish intestine sword, its new honor engraved upon the steel. Sparks of violent energy burst from within as the corroded surface cracked away to reveal the true form of the weapon, shrouded in a dark aura. A voice resonated from it declaring its release, and spirits of the kings who once wielded the blade surged forth, circling and pleading to be held. The sword demanded all focus on itself, and the air thickened as a tornado of light and souls spun across the arena. The spirits cried out for release, their voices overwhelming, until Li snapped, ordering silence. With that, the souls scattered in an explosion of light, leaving him gripping the blade alone. A message appeared, congratulating him on becoming the new master of the fish intestine sword, perfectly attuned with its will. He swung once, the sword glowing faintly, and struck the Jigu with a critical blow that split its massive body. Smirking, he pressed forward, combining tiger bearing with other techniques, his strikes blazing purple as he unleashed the Black Mountain Monarch Claw. In one decisive motion he cleaved the Jigu in 2, even shattering its gaping maw. As the beast fell, Li began drawing in its remaining soul and lifespan until a blue crystal surfaced from its remains. The system declared he had earned the Jigui's right crystal eye, a diamond-like core gleaming cold and blue in his grasp. Among the 9 famous swords forged by the divine blacksmith Uyezi, the fish intestine sword stands as one of his masterpieces. Though short enough to serve as a dagger, upon releasing its true form it transforms into a longsword, and with it awakens the sinister will sealed inside. Fire left by Uyezi's descendant and blood soaked deep from countless past wielders now converge, granting its master mysterious strength. As Li grips the weapon, the hidden secret of Uyezi reveals itself. The first Uyezi had forged 9 blades in his lifetime, each with unique properties, and these are remembered today as the 9 famous swords. Light swirls around the fish intestine sword, forming symbols that flow into Li's right hand. Feeling it harden with power, he clenches his fist in exhilaration, realizing his magic capacity has risen by 60 points. nearly tripling the 76 he once had at level 30. The surge feels like a vast river coursing through him. Watching from the side, the security officials curse, lamenting that the degree had been stolen before their eyes. One demands what should be done, while another warns they cannot act as if nothing happened. They discuss how the Jigu, slain while gathering the fighting flower, had also possessed the illusion pearl, and such a treasure cannot be left in enemy hands. One insists the nest must be destroyed, another suggests striking Li down. Doubt rises. How can they defeat someone who absorbed all the Jigui's flames rather than extinguishing them? Yet another argues now is their chance. Though Li swallowed the world-ending fire, he and his ally are clearly fatigued from battle. They conclude to overwhelm him and demand the illusion pearl, and if he resists, feed him to the beasts. One shakes his head, noting the executive director once saw potential in Li, but laments that he has now become entangled in something meaningless. A mocking laugh echoed through the air, followed by a voice remarking that he hadn't expected to find 2 big catches here, no, perhaps 3. Everyone turned their gaze toward the newcomers, the same men who had been chasing earlier. One of them grinned, saying there were indeed 3 prizes: Li, the Jigui's treasure, and even the white tiger's hunting dogs. Another smirked and asked if today happened to be someone's birthday. The guard demanded to know how they had gotten inside, and the men only laughed, mocking that they simply walked through the front door. The guards stiffened in anger, realizing a flaw must have slipped past their inspection. The intruders were quickly identified: Iron Mace Demon Yang, Sawblade Park, and Crimson Target Bai. Instead of targeting another White Tiger dungeon, they had sniffed out this place, meaning the research facilities were already compromised. Yang lifted his hand, chains whirling around it with a spiked iron ball at the end, saying they had plenty to discuss. He swung it toward a guard, forcing the group into a desperate plan. One would call for reinforcements while the other tried to stall. But before the messenger could escape, Park cut him off with a grin, taunting that this was only the warm-up and daring him to enjoy the fight. Meanwhile, Yang blocked another guard, mocking his attempt to resist, his sword shattering the moment it met the mace. Laughing, Yang hurled the weapon again, the spiked ball crushing into the man's shoulder before smashing his face clean off in an instant. Yang jeered at his weakness, only for Park to snap at him not to waste a useful lead. Annoyed, Yang growled that there was still another target anyway, sparking an argument between them. At that moment, Bai stepped forward, advancing toward Li and Beak. Tense, Biak demanded to know his intentions. Bai sighed, admitting he didn't truly want to, but it couldn't be helped. He apologized coldly before declaring they would have to die here for him. Li firmly stated he had no intention of dying here, earning a sharp side-eye from Bai, who snapped at him to quit stalling and just fight. Unfazed, Li raised his hand toward the sky and told him to consider it only if he could dodge what was coming. Everyone froze as the boss monster Jigu appeared overhead, its timing tied to the eggs it had been laying. Li mused aloud, curious how the female would react upon learning her mate had been slain, and warned Bai to do his best to survive. The creature shrieked, unleashing a storm of blazing light as fire rained down like meteors, scorching the ground. Panic erupted as the group scattered, shouting in confusion, while Yang barked orders to drive the beast away, even demanding the scroll be kept safe. The 3 of them lunged to contain the Jigu, yet its attacks still caught them in the chaos. Watching with a smirk, Li turned back to Beak, explaining that in nature the female guarded the young while the male hunted, so it was only natural she had appeared once her mate was threatened. Beak stared, unsettled, wondering just who this man really was before asking where he intended to go. Li answered casually that he was heading out to collect more crystal eyes. Beak reminded him his body wasn't in any condition for that, but Li replied that he had already recovered his stamina and was fine now. When Beak warned again of the danger, Li reassured him not to worry, holding out a crystal and claiming he had his own methods. The scene shifts back to an earlier exchange between Li and Iroh, when Li had asked if there was any reason to consume a crystal eye even after absorbing Jigui's flames. Iroh replied that of course there was, prompting Li to question why, since strengthening his flames should allow him to craft artifacts from the eye with better efficiency. Iroh explained that once he had devoured the creature's soul, the process moved beyond simple attribute stacking into full core transformation, warning further that following the crystal eye's path might even turn him into a Jigu himself. In that moment, Li's eyes glowed with a deep violet light, his expression shifting between darkness and brightness, as if caught between 2 states. A screen appeared announcing that destruction and ghost attributes had been added to the 8 trigram urn's fire, merging its elements to forge an entirely new property, ruin. The 8 trigram urns flame evolved into the 8 trigram urns world-ending flame. Notifications followed in rapid succession. He had become a Jigu, his strength rising by 2, his attributes by 4. He had acquired the creature's specialties, unlocking the ability to manipulate spirit and world-ending flame along with mastery over the spirit flame itself, each revelation echoing with the promise of overwhelming power. Lee soars through the sky like a Jigu, his mouth and eyes glowing an eerie blue, striking fear into the 2 men watching below. A screen flashes that the Black Mountain Monarch Claw has been activated, and in an instant he ends their game, descending back to the ground. His dagger presses halfway into Young's neck, and when Young mutters for him to finish it, Lee instead begins drawing out his soul. Soon after, he seizes another crystal, this one from a female Jigu. The screen declares he has absorbed the right crystal eye, and a flood of notifications overwhelms him, detailing his stat growth. He notes with some surprise that his magic power has risen by 66, realizing it may be greater because this is his second time, though he senses there are limits. The system announces he has become a Jigu vessel, his form a cluster of fire and spirit able to command Jigu attributes at will, to raise the earth in flames of death and scorch the skies. Having consumed 2 crystal eyes, he is described as a calamity, one who brings wildfires and droughts wherever he goes. The title Jigu vessel is bestowed upon him, his attributes strengthened, and his dungeon rank jumps to 9th place. Lee thinks how chaotic things must be outside, as not 1 but 2 Jigu, rulers of the Black-Red Mountain Range, had been slain in succession. Looking down at Yang, he reminds him of his earlier wish to die. Bai hesitates, stammering a plea, but Lee replies coldly that causalgia, said to be the most excruciating pain known, awaits him, unless he speaks and tells everything he knows. Beak watches in awe, comparing the fiery glow around Lee to holding the sun's core itself. Lee narrows his gaze and asks if the White Tiger had ordered them up the Black-Red Mountain Range to unseal something. Bai falters before admitting it, and Lee recalls how the White Tiger clan's sudden rise began about 13 or 14 years ago. The 7 cryptic scriptures of Hazan, comparable to 7 scrolls, had been unearthed by them 2 decades back in a nameless dungeon. Though only 3 of these scriptures were recovered, each carried immense power, enough to grant overwhelming results. The clan leader, Heavenly Swordsman Moonsung, stood as one of the strongest swordsmen alive, yet his followers had not been nearly as remarkable until their explosive rise. This surge earned them fame worldwide in recent years. Unsatisfied, Lee demands clarity. When Bai tries to plead, Lee cuts him short, saying whether mercy is granted depends on his answer. With tears streaming, Bai explains that each scripture carries different knowledge, such as calling upon ancient constellations long forgotten. These constellations, remnants from the dawn of creation, though faint and scattered, still hold sacred power. Over time they took their places across the cosmos, becoming what are called the Forgotten Stars, and their strength can still be drawn upon. The White Monarch had safeguarded this knowledge, yet of the 3 scriptures in the White Tiger's possession, the most vital one remains missing. Lee connects it in thought to Peter's key, realizing the scriptures are intended to unlock it. Speaking coldly, he demands to know why Bai truly came, suspecting it wasn't for petty revenge. Trembling, Bai admits it was to search for the illusion pearl. Lee's eyes sharpen, recalling his unease, sensing that beneath the hatred he felt lingered something far deeper. Bai reveals that the first scripture contained a method for creating unbreathing warriors, describing how those who lost their souls to starlight were stripped of ego and reborn as holy knights that obey the will of the stars. These beings, though void of self, became fearsome and faithful weapons. The materials needed for such creations were the rare flowers found in the Seokyeon bed, like the crying and laughing blossoms, which also served as the key ingredients for forging an illusion pearl. Lee realizes then why a training institute was built here. The Black-Red Mountain Range mirrored the conditions of Seokyeon, making it the perfect site to test recruits and select those suited for transformation into these warriors. Those who vanished here had likely been sacrificed under the guise of accidents. Lee concludes that the one overseeing all this must be the White Tiger's executive director O, second in command. But with the sudden disappearance of Tom and the scattering of Peter's key, their plans had begun to unravel. Lee asks if Bai hoped to expose the White Tiger's true nature with the illusion pearl, demanding what other evidence he had. Bai admits there is more, though much remains hidden. Without hesitation, Lee ends him with a swift strike of his dagger, then thinks to himself it's time to uncover the location of the research facility responsible for both the illusion pearl and the mass-produced warriors. Approaching a guard, Lee removes the man's glasses, telling him he already knows what comes next. The guard trembles, asking if Lee does not fear the wrath of their patron god. Lee coldly replies, questioning if he truly believes that deity stands with him. Before Lee finishes, a message flashes before them, declaring that the divine being Tiger has abandoned its believer for failing to prove worthy. Stricken, the man collapses, and Lee gazes upward, saying the god seeks stronger and worthier followers, not weak, dying fools like him. With a single slap, Lee rips Beak's clothes, drawing a startled protest as Beak demands to know what he's doing. Lee orders him to sit in the lotus position, and when Beak asks if it will be done right now, Lee replies that treatment begins immediately. Relieved, Beak sits as told, and Lee explains that studying a Ghostborn's residual energy will take time, warning that while it may last only an hour or two in reality, within it could feel like dozens of hours, even months. Still, it will end eventually, so he must not move. Lee cautions that if he even considers giving up, he will begin to overdo it, which inevitably means, before Lee finishes, Beak cuts in, saying he'll become either a monster or a ghost. Lee agrees, stating firmly that if he sees the slightest sign of that happening, he'll eliminate him without hesitation, knowing that allowing a broken Xerxes to roam free would bring disaster. Beak only smiles, telling him not to worry, leaving Lee momentarily at a loss for words. He reflects that though Xerxes often acts like he lacks identity, he's always carried a single unshakable desire. At last, Lee announces the start, extending his hand as purple energy radiates out. A system notice declares that the flames of the first storm, the world-ending fire, are evolving Beak's body. The Ghostborn ignites in searing flames as Lee thrusts the energy into him. Beak is struck by the overwhelming surge of energy, struggling to endure until suddenly he finds himself standing in a snowy landscape. Confused, he wonders where he is, then sees his younger self stumble in the snow before collapsing, only to be carried on the back of a man rushing to help. Realizing what he's witnessing, the elder Beak thinks he has entered his unconscious mind, a place he never wished to revisit. The scene shifts, and he runs through a street while angry voices behind him shout to throw the monster into an orphanage, questioning where such a creature was found. He remembers scavenging scraps from garbage, sleeping on cold streets under cardboard, hearing people mutter that the monster still breathed as they beat him in his sleep. Watching it again, he wonders if death back then might have been better than living with these scars. At that moment, a duplicate of himself appears, calling out that he has been searching for him, urging him to come along before the cold winter deepens. Beak, aching for connection, reaches for the hand of this darker version. The shadow urges him to accept it, but Beak pulls back at the last second, reminding himself not to give in. The darker self presses, asking what's wrong, but Beak steals his resolve, thinking this isn't where he belongs. A screen appears declaring, "Divine being, your heart pierces the twilight, smiling faintly at your righteous will." Lee leaves Beak to recover, his thoughts echoing that the worst is over for now, marveling at how stubbornly the Ghostborn endured. He admits that had demonization begun, even with the full assessment of the Jigu vessel, he might not have prevailed, though considering Xerxes as the father, such strength is only natural. Deciding to move on while Beak steadies himself, he turns his attention toward the Illusion Pearl's research facility, but at that instant a notification flares up, declaring that the Ruin of Shelth has been activated. The low-grade ruin engraving has reached its peak, evolving into an intermediate grade that cloaks everyone in the area, making them vanish entirely from outside perception. Lee recalls his earlier words yet adds grimly that before proceeding, he must first erase the unnecessary witnesses. His gaze sharpens toward the man who had been spying on him all along, marking him as the next target. The spy bolts away, determined to report everything to the executive director O while Lee is occupied, but he doesn't realize Lee is already on his heels. In an instant, Lee's power slams into his chest, dropping him flat on the ground. As the man fumbles for his sword, Lee smirks and drives a dagger into his chest first, remarking that their paths cross again. The man demands to know his intent, and Lee replies with a sly grin that while he had planned to kill him right away, he prefers not to draw suspicion from the executive director O. Producing an illusion pearl, he explains he has a far easier method and presses it against the man's mouth. A screen flashes. Player Song Yujun has succumbed to the illusion pearl, his reason paralyzed, ego suspended, body trapped in a hypnotic trance. Collapsing briefly, he rises at Lee's command, now hollow and soulless. With mocking amusement, Lee orders him to sit, roll, and bark. As Lee mirrored the man's actions, he finally commanded him to kill himself. The man clutched his neck, starting to choke, but Lee immediately called it off. The man released his grip, and Lee remarked on the sheer ingenuity of what they had created, wondering just how powerful the others must be. He instructed the man to report to the executive director that everything was normal, to act as if nothing had happened. Boasting, the man agreed while a screen announced that Snake, the divine being, crackled with glee at the clever plan, and the tiger had taken an interest in his ambition. Lee clapped and dismissed him. The man thanked him, his body now revolving in blue energy, but Lee stopped him, asking about the technique he was using. Recognizing its potential, Lee decided it would be a perfect fit for Beak. The man explained it was the flying tiger's trailing gale, a method using wind for stealth and disguise derived from the tiger's step, and agreed to teach Lee, noting it would take time without a skill book. Lee decided he would figure it out on his own, and as the men demonstrated the technique, he mirrored their movements. They shouted in disbelief, asking how he had managed it. After only a few attempts, Lee successfully copied the steps and acquired the tiger steps. The screen confirmed that flying tiger trailing gale had been created. The men marveled, saying they had spent years mastering it while he learned it almost instantly, calling him truly admirable. Lee waved them off, saying that was enough and telling them to leave. They vanished, acknowledging him, and the screen updated. He had learned Qigong, shelter, stealth, and concealment. Rising above, Lee saw the screen announce that the divine being, Tiger, was laughing, completely dumbfounded. Lee activated the flying tiger trail and made his way toward his destination, eyes fixed on a distant nest. He thought about how a pair of Jigu laid an egg only once every century, finally spotting it atop the nest. The egg burned with a pink flame, its energy radiating intensely. The screen noted that more time would be required before it hatched. Lee approached, reflecting on the Jigui's nature. Three formed, yet essentially a gathering of spirits, lacking fixed physical bones. Their ancestors had taken avian shapes, and while they generally retained that form, they could adjust according to circumstances, with potential to redirect their nature and enhance intellect beyond the ordinary. Observing the egg's balanced strength and ideal condition, Lee concluded that fostering it into a spiritual bird was optimal. Stepping closer, he began absorbing the flame through his mouth, the pink aura spreading around him as he consumed it. The screen remarked that the divine being Tiger watched with growing interest, curious how Lee would handle the egg. Lee considered the advice from the divine beings. One suggested that instead of a crude winged form, the egg should become a rare beast, maybe a tiger. Good Season disagreed, recommending a falcon or a hunting dog instead, and even argued that a young hawk or a heavenly dog would be ideal. Lee thought it was amusing that for once they seemed to make some sense. Their debate went back and forth, growing increasingly frustrating for him, and the screen noted that the relationship between the two divine beings had severely worsened. Lee smirked, feeling the flames he had absorbed empowering him, and decided it was time to head to the research facility. Inside the research facility, a man shouted about the executive director demanding answers, while another replied that he simply told them to wait and assured it would be resolved soon. Slamming his hand on the table, the first man fumed, thinking about everything he had accomplished, from the illusion pearl used to burn the god warrior to the straight coordinate he developed with third-grade skills, various divine armaments, artifacts, and authorities, and yet the inspection department was still after him. It was the executive director who had ordered him to prepare all this, whom he had contacted repeatedly, and still all he got was to wait. Frustrated, he yelled, asking how much he had done for them, recalling that the board of inspectors had said the inspection department would be coming today. He ordered all suspicious documents destroyed, reminding himself that as a soon-to-be official third-ranked director, even the Guildhall project supervised by the executive director alone would raise curiosity, making the association dangerous for him. He reasoned that reaching White Tiger rank soon and securing the 5-star blade would keep him safe. Taking a deep breath, he felt slightly relieved, thinking of the wealthy conglomerate families and the opportunities to gain advantage, though he regretted the loss of the vehicle and wondered about the lead guy's disappearance. Walking toward the cylinder containing a floating figure, he mused about examining and taking them along, acknowledging their strength. Then his attention snapped to another problem. Why hadn't anyone been sent to retrieve the illusion pearl? He barked orders to find out immediately, fearing disaster if the truth came out. As Lee approached the facility, the Tiger and Good Season continued their bickering, tossing insults back and forth, and he wondered how long it would go on. Finally he arrived, pausing as the massive facility gate came into view before him. Lee stands frozen for a moment in front of the facility gate as the screen flashes repeatedly, announcing the activation of his stealth skill and the disappearance of all sound from the surroundings. He feels the faint hum of energy as the system confirms speed of light movement, warning him that traps have been triggered. His beast senses detect the direction of the traps, but none have detected him yet. Viper Eye skill activates in tandem, quickly scanning all the traps around him, mapping every hazard with precise clarity. The voice from the screen blends with the chaotic chatter inside the facility, urgent commands, complaints about delays, and frantic questions about the Jigui's return. Lee hears one person shout about the impossibility of their situation if caught, another demand that objects be moved, and the revelation that the Jigui's corpse has just been discovered, followed by wild speculation about who could have killed him. Reports of an unconscious figure found on the training grounds add to the tension, all underscored by a pressing need to clear everything before the inspection department arrives. Lee's thoughts sharpen as he identifies the facility he must reach, the Illusion Pearl production site, and he dashes forward, sprinting through the shadows. Inside, the air hits him with the strong scent of poisonous herbs. The screen warns that the crying flower's toxins have spread through the room and the laughing flower could trigger a violent fit. A final alert flashes. His Majesty, the tiger's calamity, has his eye on you. Every sense tenses as Lee advances, fully aware that the danger is immediate and the stakes are higher than ever. Lee watches as everyone around him scrambles, hastily digging through boxes like they're trying to hide something. He stops in front of a solidly locked door. The screen prompts that a proof ID is needed, asking for a pattern or password. He hesitates, considering forcing it open, but realizes that would cause a commotion too soon. He wonders if Peter's key will work and reaches for it, then stops, feeling the gaze of the Void Monarch. Instead, he places his fingerprints on the pad, and to his surprise, the door unlocks instantly. The screen confirms his master ID and announces the lock is released. Lee stares at the door, baffled, wondering what kind of power the key holds to open it so effortlessly. Lee steps into the facility, and the screen flashes that Divine Being Tiger feels slightly embarrassed at the sudden unlocking. Questions swirl around the tiger about whether Lee has innate talent for releasing things, while the snake beside him flicks its tongue, claiming it's possible because this human is an amalgamation of 10 red-banded snakes. Tiger nods in acknowledgement, bursting into admiration for Lee's bravery and remarkable skill, now feeling a stronger desire toward him. Lee thinks about the White Monarch, realizing he probably has no idea Lee wields Peter's key and scoffs at the snake remark, muttering that he doesn't want to hear that from an actual snake. Moving deeper, he sees countless cylinders containing people, far more than expected, and the screen warns that His Majesty, the tiger's calamity, has unleashed his rage. Lee grimaces at the scene, thinking of the ghostly warriors and the god-sent fighters, while the screen adds that Divine Being Owl expresses profound distaste at what unfolds before him. Lee glares at the tiger, who smirks and asks what she plans to do after staring at him like that. Suddenly Owl erupts in rage, pleading that justice be served through him. The screen declares that sudden quips of Owl has been created, describing the owl that pierces through the tall light as a force against the dark influence the tiger has spread in the human world, while feeling deep sorrow for those who have died caught in these schemes. She strongly pleads that Lee bring peace and rest to all of them, promising a reward in the form of a blessing suited to his result. Lee's eyes widen as he thinks, is she really going this far? Even with her anger at the Void Monarch, he hadn't expected her to act so decisively, and the promise of a blessing appropriate for his result hints that he might even gain an authority from her. The screen flashes again, this time with a message from the Divine Presence. Divine Being Tiger is curious to see your response. Accepting this could mean the White Monarch will twist it back against you, but refusing would have Minerva completely turn away. The intensity of Divine Being Owl's gaze presses down on Lee as the message continues, highlighting the impossible choice before him. He hesitates, feeling the weight of both outcomes, and then stops short of making any selection. Instead, he thinks carefully and says there is one thing he wants to ask of the patron god, the tiger, holding the screen's quiet tension as he prepares his request. Lee addressed the screen saying there is one thing he wants to ask of the patron god, the tiger. Immediately, the screen confirmed that Divine Being Tiger has gladly agreed to answer. Lee continued, assuming the tiger already knew why he had come, and the tiger confirmed, urging him to cut straight to the point. Lee considered leading him on vaguely but chose to speak plainly, declaring he plans to take everything in the facility. He added that he will not allow others to claim what he cannot have, and he wants to know the tiger's thoughts on his decision. He reflected that he has already deeply intrigued the Void Monarch and has become a highly desired priest candidate. No one would easily give him up. The screen responded that Tiger is smirking at his obvious thoughts, admitting he likes Lee a great deal and noting that any household member tricked by him would be a fool, but he promises not to impede Lee's ambitions. A sudden quest notification appeared labeled Tiger Plunger, describing that the tiger, trapped in hardships, has a strong desire to see what a new priest candidate like Lee can accomplish. The quest rules are strict. He must plunder everything he sees, assimilate all he plunders, face severe divine punishment if he fails, and if he succeeds, he will gain authority over all spoils. Depending on his performance, he might also receive the tiger's blessing, trapped in hardships. Lee smirked, thinking it's done, and wondered how Minerva would react. Divine being Owl showed delight, saying she expected he would make this choice. Lee thought she's rather clumsy and clicked agree. The screen immediately displayed Owl's plea. Eliminate all Godsend warriors and destroy the relevant facility. Lee decided he'd delayed enough and activated stealth status. Suddenly, a guard spotted him and shouted, "Who's there?" Lee responded by activating a trigram, Orin's world-ending flame, and the entire room turned pink, swirling with energy. The nickname Jigu's vessel appeared, and fiery wing-like flames erupted behind him, engulfing the room. Security panicked, shouting about Jigu's flames appearing. Lee smirked again and flew, unleashing a storm of flames that incinerated guards into ashes as he rampaged through the facility. Alarms blared that fire had broken out in the central research building. People screamed as the inferno spread. Guards tried to contain it with ice magic from a distance, forming barriers to control the blaze, but Lee's flames shattered them easily. A fat man staring at the burning facility shouted in disbelief, "What on earth is happening?" The chief shouted in fury, demanding what the security team was doing for this disaster to occur, but before an answer came, another massive blast rocked the facility, throwing him to the ground. Another man rushed over, asking if he was all right, and the chief barked, "How many people do we have left?" The man hesitated, but the chief demanded an answer. Before he could respond, yet another explosion tore through the building, filling the air with smoke and darkness. Coughing, the man warned about the choking ash. A screen flashed, "You have burn infection." Their eyes widened in alarm as a warning blared, "Burn infection is rampant here, evacuate immediately." Purple energy swirled around Lee as guards screamed in panic, feeling their bodies melt, their forms vanishing in the flames. The chief tried to flee, but Lee intercepted, smirking and hurling a dagger. The chief barely blocked it with his sword, shouting, "Who are you? Did Hyof send you? How are you controlling Jigu's world-ending flame?" The guards froze, eyes wide, shouting in disbelief, "Lee, it's Lee!" The chief's mind raced, confused and furious. How could someone who should be far away appear right in front of him? The thought of working with someone like this excited him. He could build a clan like the White Tiger in 5 years. He raised his sword, demanding where Lee thought he was going. Lee turned, narrowly dodging the chief's strike, and a massive blast erupted behind him. The chief pressed the attack, lunging again with his sword. Lee gritted his teeth, noting the chief's one eye had turned black and shallow. He realized this was a godsend warrior, and if executives were transformed too, perhaps White Tiger's others were as well. This was a perfect chance to gauge what a godsend warrior truly was. A screen appeared. Your integrated magic circuits begin circling violently. Jigu's world-ending flame blazes furiously. 30 extra stats are allocated to strength, raising it from 111 to 147, and dexterity rises by the same. Lee shot forward at the chief but was shoved back. The chief's surprise was clear. "This is a newcomer?" he roared, claiming the heavens had come to aid him, and charged with his massive sword. Lee studied his attack, noting the unnerving ghostly energy, the predatory aura like a tiger chasing prey. This was His Majesty, the tiger's calamity. As Lee surged forward, the guards' eyes turned pitch black, shallow and hollow. Their voices unified in rage as they screamed, "You bastard, I will kill you," charging straight at him. Lee realized these were godsend warriors too. He decided to mix blood poison and form a world-ending fire barrier. Sweeping his dagger in a full 360-degree motion, he conjured a flaming tornado, but the warriors plunged their swords into it, tearing through the barrier and shattering its momentum. Lee's mind raced. This could not end well if continued. He resolved to switch tactics, embracing divide and conquer. Sprinting ahead, the guards shouted, "He's running away! Catch him!" A screen flashed. "You are in the midst of battle." Unbending spirit activated, Lee sprinted into a narrow corridor and planted himself there. The guards shouted, "We've got him, the little rat," but the chief realized they hadn't cornered him. Lee had led them here to avoid fighting all at once. The chief cursed, but before he could finish, Lee began slashing through the guards one by one, his strikes precise and unstoppable. The screen flashed. Authority 100%. Bullseye has taken effect. As Lee carved through the crowd, the chief lunged, grabbing Lee by the neck and hoisting him up, shouting, "I finally got you, Lee. I am far superior in level and stats, so just surrender." Lee smirked, taunting, "Do you really think capturing me lets you do whatever you want?" Symbols began forming across his hand, fish intestine salt pouring forth as he commanded, "Howl." A burst of energy exploded. The screen announced, "Twin blood resonance is occurring, the evil dragon Snaggletooth awakening." If the divine blacksmith Oyezi earned eternal fame with only a few masterpieces, then the demonic blacksmith Tauti cemented his everlasting reputation by crafting countless creations, each a testament to his unmatched skill. Among gods and stars, they are legendary opposites, their greatness incomparable, and their goals and eras so different that direct confrontation was impossible, until now. At this precise moment, the chance to judge superiority arises. The fish intestine sword, now soaked with blood, glows brilliantly as the evil dragon Snaggletooth begins to reveal its full power. The screen flashes that Lee has fulfilled part of the qualification requirement. The dragon gleams, the lock undone. Lee hurls an attack at the chief, sending him flying, and notices the dagger stretching, glowing purple, transforming fully into the evil dragon Snaggletooth. Closing his eyes, he focuses, then opens them and takes his stance as if daring the gods to acknowledge the path ahead. Shock spreads among the divine observers. Good Season stares at Lee in astonishment for unlocking her artifact. Snake's eyes widen. An owl urges Lee to wield Tioti's demonic craft for righteousness. A great demon eyes the twin legendary swords, while Tiger praises him for gaining a new set of fangs. The chief, sensing the lethal force from his patron god, realizes his only chance is to obey his instincts to survive. Lee launches attacks relentlessly. The chief parries but is forced backward by the overwhelming energy. The sword seems to have a voice of its own, crying, demanding more. Snaggletooth urging him to witness its full potential. Lee drives forward, swinging the sword in all directions, saturating the atmosphere in purple, an immense force barreling toward the chief. His sword shatters under the onslaught, and he grits his teeth, realizing that escape is his only option if he hopes to survive. Messages flashed, announcing the fish intestine sword's brilliant edge and Snaggletooth's vicious fang. Lee blinked, puzzled by their pride and desire for victory, but the chief was fleeing, refusing to be caught. Lee refused to let him escape, crisscrossing the swords, unleashing immense energy as he surged forward. Dark purple energy swirled, pursuing the chief, enveloping him, consuming him, until a massive blast sent him sprawling to the ground, gasping that he didn't want to die. The screen warned that despair spread, frustration intensified, and negative thoughts filled the stage, fueling the world-ending fire with grudges. Lee thought over the chief's desperation. Were these his regrets? Where was he trying to go with his body? Realizing that aside from a ghost-born, no one else warranted such effort, Lee decided to postpone killing him and instead followed, watching as the chief dragged himself onward, murmuring that he had to survive no matter what. The chief dragged himself forward but collapsed and died right in front of the gate. A message announced that the fish intestine sword had withdrawn. Lee muttered in disbelief that the chief had fallen just at the door, though a simple hand raise might have opened it. Another message said the evil dragon Snaggletooth had been sealed again, and the door remained firmly locked, requiring a patron to unlock it. Placing his hand on the patron, Lee heard the familiar clicking and watched the door slowly swing open. He noted that this key seemed specialized for unlocking mechanisms. A message appeared praising his persistence as the tiger stared at him in wonder. Inside the room, a strange device stood, its wires piercing a human figure, but Lee quickly realized it was a girl. He leapt onto the device, standing before her, and recognized her immediately. Shin, the girl who had once loved him. He wondered if she had been turned into a godsend warrior, but a message confirmed his analysis. An abnormality was detected. Grasping her hand, Lee realized she was something far more intense, more fundamental, beyond godsend warriors, demons, monsters, goblins, or even the Jigu. So this was what the executive director O had tried to hide. The ghost warriors had merely been a stepping stone to perfect this entity, Gildal, the head of the goblins. A message appeared, noting that Lee was observing her condition closely with beast senses. His Majesty the Tiger Calamity was in effect, but analysis showed only 41% impact, too low to consider her a godsend warrior of Gildal. Yet her body was extraordinary, even her muscle fibers were unusually tough, and in her current state most players would be devoured instantly. Relief washed over Lee as he realized the brainwashing hadn't begun. The tiger watched, curious about his next move, while the owl urged him to aid the girl. He began removing the tubes from her body, and a message confirmed the owl's trust in him, ordering him to move her to safety and provide first aid. The tiger was astonished by his choice, opening his mouth in disbelief. Using Trigram's Urn's world-ending flame, the destruction of the place restarted, triggering a cascade of notifications. District destruction had begun, poisonous elements removed, foreign substances neutralized. His Majesty the Tiger Calamity attempted to resist, but his defiance was pulverized, and the defense mechanisms were destroyed as treatment continued. Recovery surged through her body as her wounds healed rapidly, all external stimulation cut off. The first form of the world-ending flame clashed violently with His Majesty the Tiger Calamity, a faint blue glow wreathed in purple radiating before Li. He thought he had to remove the tiger's calamity and purge all negative aspects of Gildal, leaving only the positive, but just as before, Shin needed to perceive the world herself. All he could do was wait. A message declared that Divine Being Tiger scoffed at his choice to heal the girl instead of exploiting her, mocking his restraint. Li extended his hand, activating soul extortion. The chief and guard's bodies turned to ash and were absorbed into lead. Another message confirmed he had absorbed the ashes, boosting his strength and agility, though the Tiger Calamity initially resisted. By force, a merge began and succeeded. Li purified His Majesty the Tiger Calamity and harnessed it as material for a world-ending flame, increasing his magic power by 0.02. Divine Being. Tiger laughed uncontrollably. Li muttered to himself about White Monarch's madness, recalling the earlier chatter about the Tiger's inspection department raiding the facility. Now it made sense. The inspection team was panicking because the executive director O's political maneuvers were being disrupted, and that might be why White Monarch laughed like a madman at the chaos unfolding. Li's voice darkened, muttering that now was not the time to think. The screen announced that the Jigu vessel had been equipped. Cradling the girl in his arms, wings unfurling behind him, he launched into a massive blast. The remaining guards froze, confused, questioning why no one was responding and recalling that the inspection department was supposed to have entered the dungeon. Before they could act further, the ground beneath them erupted in a tremendous explosion. High in the sky, Li flew away, holding the girl tightly as they soared through the chaos below. A man arrived at the burning facility surveying the chaos. It was Quan, third in command of the White Tiger clan, part of the old tigers under Hyohei. He muttered at the mess, then turned to his subordinates, asking if they'd learned what happened. One confirmed that many explosives had been stored underground. Quan raised an eyebrow, questioning. Explosives. The man explained that traces of Agni's yuan, flames, forests of fire, demons, lightning, bullets, and other destructive elements suggested the origin was the Jigui's world-ending flame. Quan realized it had all been planned, as if the facility had been rigged to blow him up along with everything else. He wondered why it had exploded without the perpetrator's control, malfunction, or mistake. But the man doubted it was accidental. Quan muttered about the cunning executive director O and the possibility of some unknown factor beyond even her foresight. He ordered a thorough inspection, warning that dangers could still emerge. His guards acknowledged, and Quan added that he'd heard rumors from the Red that had surprised some of their ranks. Before he could dwell on it further, a screen appeared, asking if he wished to log out. He wished it would at least give him a hint, but knew better. The screen declared that the Divine Being Tiger was pleased with the dungeon's chaos. Quan nodded grimly, accepting the outcome, and resolved that he would handle the executive director O himself, confident that his god desired the same. Beak opened his eyes groggy, asking where he was. Li stood before him, holding a girl, and said he was finally awake. Beak glanced at her and asked if she was Li's wife. A mirror appeared in front of him, the reflection confirming his full recovery, his face and body smooth and unscathed. Li smiled, praising his endurance, and Beak cried. Holding Shin carefully, Li gently called her awake. She didn't respond at first, then jumped down and lay on the ground, murmuring that it felt unreal, that she couldn't believe she'd ended up here. Beak and Li exchanged glances. Li explained everything, and she gasped, astonished that the tyrant had saved her during her captivity. She checked if she'd been sleep-talking or moving in her sleep, relieved that she hadn't, and Li assured her she hadn't. She exhaled, feeling reassured. Li suggested they vacate the area since it wasn't safe. Curious, she began asking personal questions: blood type, birthday, favorite food, which Li answered. She excitedly recalled a memory from 2 years prior in San Francisco, matching his favorite food choice to a game against France, and laughed at how keen her memory was. She accused him of being fake, then quickly recognized him, teasing about switching his favorite dish. Li considered leaving her behind, but she insisted he was the same person. Energetic and insistent, she demanded to know where they were going. Lee, initially annoyed, smirked as a message appeared confirming the completion of 2 sudden quests, rewarding him with illusion pearls and a flask of wisdom. The trio began moving forward, Lee muttering about how stupid she was.